The little red car rolled across the marble and stopped at the tip of a black Oxford shoe. The boy looked up. He tilted his head. He smiled, small, crooked, leaning to the right. The man above him went pale. His name was Kang Dae-hyun, 35, heir of the Kang Hotel Empire. A black dragon tattoo climbed the right side of his neck, a single white pearl in its mouth. Three-piece black suit, black tie. The lobby of the Imperial Nara Hotel froze around him. Then her voice cut the air. Elias, come here. Isabella Wright crossed the marble fast. Black, beautiful, slender, athletic. Black cropped top, black high-waist leggings, white sneakers. A wellness speaker now. A mother for 4 years. Alone for 4 years. Dae-hyun saw her. His jaw locked. 4 years of silence collapsed into 1 second. He looked at the boy, then at her, then at the boy again. That child can't be mine, he spat. The lobby held its breath. Elias did not cry. Elias took 1 step forward. He tilted his head the other way. He smiled the same crooked smile. Why do you smile just like me? Dae-hyun's hand began to shake. Somewhere in a black and red hanbok, an older woman with a jade ring was already calculating her next move. Somewhere in a sealed envelope, a paternity test was waiting. Somewhere 4 years back, an email had been planted, a wedding ring had been placed on a desk, and a pregnant woman had walked out into the rain. But what Elias did next? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Isabella's heel slipped on the marble 2 steps before the dining hall, and Dae-hyun caught her by the elbow without looking. He had been doing that all night. The Kang mansion had floors built for showing off, not for walking, and she had been warned twice already by the housekeeper, in Korean, in that polite voice that meant the opposite of polite. Isabella had smiled both times. She did not understand the words, she understood the eyes. You're shaking, Dae-hyun said. I'm not. Your hand is. She looked down. He was right. She let go of his arm first, before he could let go of hers. That small thing mattered tonight. She did not know yet why it mattered. Only that everything she did inside this house was being measured by someone she could not see. The hallway opened into a hall the size of a chapel. 12 people at a long black table. 1 empty seat at the head. Candles in silver. Not for light, for warning. Isabella had learned that already. The Kangs lit candles when they wanted you to feel small. She wore a black dress she had bought herself. Simple, long sleeves. No jewelry except the engagement ring he had given her 3 weeks ago in a hotel room in Seoul. The ring felt heavier here than it had felt there. Everything did. Dae-hyun pulled out her chair. Sun-hee, his mother, was already seated at the far end, hands folded on the linen, the jade ring on her right hand catching the candlelight. The ring was bigger than Isabella had expected from photographs. It looked like something a person used to break things with. Yomioni, Dae-hyun said, dipping his head. Sun-hee did not move. Isabella sat. The chair was lower than the table by an inch on purpose. She had read about that once, in a book about old houses. You build the guest chair lower so the guest looks up. She kept her chin level anyway. The first course came in white porcelain. Soup the color of bone. A woman in a gray uniform set Isabella's bowl down last. Isabella said thank you in Korean. The woman's eyes flickered to Sun-hee before flickering back. The thank you went unanswered. You speak some Korean, Sun-hee said. It was not a question. A little. Dae-hyun has been teaching me. Has he? The 2 consileros to Sun-hee's right exchanged a glance. Old men in gray suits, hair white and short, glasses with the thinnest possible frames. They had been there when Isabella walked in. They had not stood. Dae-hyun's father, Kang Jun-il, sat at the head. He was the only one at that table who had ever looked at Isabella the way a father might look at a daughter, and even that look had been brief, like sunlight through a crack. He raised his spoon. The table raised theirs. Isabella raised hers. The soup tasted like ginger and salt and something she could not name. She finished it without spilling. Sun-hee watched her finish. Between courses, Dae-hyun put his hand under the table on top of hers. He squeezed once. Isabella did not squeeze back. He was a different man inside this house. Outside, in Manhattan, in the apartment they had been sharing for 6 months, he laughed loud and cooked badly and let her win at chess on purpose. Here, his shoulders sat higher, his voice dropped half an octave, his smile, That small inclined smile that fell only to the right side, kept appearing and dying without reaching anyone. Tell us about your work, Isabella, Junil said. I run workshops. Workshops in what? Self-worth. Mostly for young mothers. Some for single women starting over. A silence. Sunhee's spoon clicked once against her bowl. Set down. How interesting, Sunhee said. And do they pay? Most of them. The free ones are by application. How charitable. Daehyun's jaw moved. Isabella felt it, the small grinding of his teeth, even from across the table. She kept her face open. Aomeoni, Daehyun said. I asked a question. She answered. We are having a conversation. The consiglieros looked at their plates. The second course was fish. The third was beef. By the fourth course, Isabella had stopped tasting. She was counting the people at the table who had not addressed her once, and she had run out of fingers on her left hand. The cousins, the aunt in pearls, the man in his 60s who Daehyun had introduced as Uncle Han, who ran the hotels. Uncle Han had nodded at her the way a man nods at furniture. She did not cry. Crying was a thing she had decided about long before this dinner. Black women in rooms like this did not cry. Black women in rooms like this finished their wine and went home and cried alone, if they cried at all. She did not cry tonight, later, either. After dessert, Sunhee folded her napkin and stood. The whole table stood with her. She moved past the chairs like a small black wind, the Bordeaux embroidery on her hanbok catching candlelight in flickers, and she stopped behind Isabella's chair. Her hand, very light, rested on Isabella's shoulder for exactly 1 second. Walk with me, please, to the garden. Daehyun started to rise. Alone, Sunhee said. Isabella stood. Her napkin had fallen. She bent for it. Daehyun bent first and pressed it into her hand. His eyes were not afraid, but they were close to a thing that lived next to afraid. She had not seen that in him before. She followed his mother out. The garden had been built around a koi pond, and the koi pond had been built around one stone the size of a small boat. The stone was wet from a fountain that ran year-round, even now in early winter, the water cold and dark and slow. Sunhee walked Isabella the long way around, past the pruned plum trees, past the wooden bridge, past the spot where lanterns hung at the height of a man's chest. She walked slowly because she could. Isabella matched her pace. My son is in love with you, Sunhee said. I'm in love with him. Yes, I know. They reached the stone. Sunhee stopped. Her hands were folded inside the long sleeves. The jade ring made a small bulge in the silk. In our family, Sunhee said, there are women who are passion, and there are women who are legacy. Do you understand the difference? I think so. You don't. The fountain made a small sound. Somewhere inside the house, a door closed. A son like mine, Sunhee said, marries legacy. Passion is what he had before legacy. Passion is what he allows himself in his 20s, in foreign cities, in apartments his mother does not visit. Legacy is what he comes home to. Legacy is what he builds with. Legacy is what survives him. Isabella did not answer. Some women, Sunhee said, are passion. Others are legacy. You are very beautiful. You are intelligent. You are, I have been told, a good speaker. You are passion. You will not be legacy. Isabella made her face into a thing that could not be read. She had been practicing that face since she was 11 years old. Are you done? She said. Sunhee turned her head a fraction. The candlelight from the lanterns slid across one cheekbone. She smiled, and it was not the smile Daehyun had inherited. Not quite. His was smaller. Hers had teeth. I have not begun, Miss Wright, but I have said enough for tonight. She turned and walked back to the house. She did not look to see if Isabella followed. Isabella stood at the stone for a long minute, counting koi. There were 9. One of them was almost completely white. She made herself remember that. The way you remember a license plate, in case you have to give a statement later. When she came back inside, Daehyun was waiting in the hallway alone. He had not sat down again. His hands were in his pockets. The consiglieros and the rest of the family had already moved into the drawing room. Voices and the click of a teacup somewhere. What did she say? He asked. She told me what kind of woman I am. What kind? Passion. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, his jaw had set. Get your coat. Daehyun, get your coat. We're going home. She did not argue. She did not have the energy. She walked past the drawing room without turning her head, and the consiglieros saw her go, and the white-haired one with the thinnest glasses watched her all the way to the door. In the car, Dae-hyun did not start the engine for a long time. He sat with both hands on the wheel and stared at the iron gate ahead of them. "She is going to be your mother-in-law," he said, "but she is not going to be your mother. It's fine. It's not fine. It will be fine. I'm not going to win her tonight. I'm going to win her over years. That's how this works." He looked at her. The dashboard light caught his face from below and made him look younger than he was. "I want children with you," he said. "I want a son who looks like you and like me. I want to teach him chess. I want to be a father. I have been thinking about this for a long time." Isabella looked at him. She had not known. They had not talked about it, not directly. They had been engaged for 3 weeks. She had thought there was time. She had thought he wanted to see Paris first, or finish the hotel project in Tokyo, or any of the dozen other things he kept on lists in his head. "Okay," she said. "Okay." "Yes." He started the car. She did not tell him what his mother had said about legacy. Not that night. Not in the months after. She held it under her ribs, the way you hold a small, sharp thing that will cut you if you breathe wrong. She held it through the wedding. She held it through the year that followed. The wedding was small by Kang standards. 80 people in a private hall in the Imperial Nara Hotel, which Dae-hyun's father owned and which his son was going to inherit. Isabella's mother flew in from Atlanta with 2 cousins and a friend from college. They sat on the bride's side. The bride's side had 9 people on it. The groom's side had 70. Sun-hee wore black. She had been told it was not the custom in the bride's country. She had worn black anyway. She sat in the front row and did not cry and did not smile, and her jade ring caught the light every time she lifted her hand to push a strand of hair behind her ear. There was no strand of hair out of place. She lifted her hand anyway. Junil walked Isabella's hand to his son's hand and held them together for 1 second longer than necessary. He whispered something to Isabella in Korean she did not understand. She thanked him. He nodded. He died 9 months later of a heart that had been telling him things for years that he had not listened to. After Junil's funeral, the house changed. Isabella felt the change the way you feel a room get colder before you see anyone open the window. The driver who used to pick her up started being late by 10 minutes, then 15. Then he was a different driver. Her name on the household manifest disappeared from the section that listed family and reappeared in the section that listed guests. She noticed because she had once asked for a copy of the manifest to send to her mother, who was visiting. The first copy and the second copy were not the same. She did not say anything. She watched. Sun-hee began holding meetings in the library at hours when Dae-hyun was at the office. Isabella, walking past, would see the door closed. She would hear the consiglieros' voices, low and careful. Sometimes a third voice she did not recognize, a man. Sometimes a woman, with a clipped accent that sounded like London by way of Hong Kong. Once she heard her own name. Once she heard the English word transfer. Once she heard the Korean word for evidence, a word Dae-hyun had taught her early on because he liked the sound of it. She mentioned none of it to Dae-hyun. He came home tired now. His father's empire had landed on his shoulders in pieces, like furniture, and he was carrying the pieces upstairs one at a time. He came home and put his head in her lap on the couch and slept for 20 minutes and then woke up and apologized and ate cold food and went to the office in their apartment and worked until 2. She did not add to his weight. She was not raised to add to weight. She was raised to carry it. So she carried it. She kept teaching. She drove herself to her workshops in Brooklyn and the Bronx and once a month in Newark. She stood in front of rooms of women who looked like her and unlike her, women in scrubs and women in suits and women in jeans with paint on the knees, and she talked about worth. She talked about the voice inside you that other people had installed when you were small. She talked about evicting that voice. She was good at it. She was good at it because she had been doing the work on herself for 10 years, and because the work was not finished, and because she knew it was not finished. Some afternoons, after a session, she would sit in her car in the parking lot and put both hands flat on the steering wheel and breathe for 10 minutes before driving home. She did this so she could come home empty. Dae-hyun did not need a wife who came home full of other people's pain. He needed a wife who could hold his. She held his. One Tuesday in early March, 4 months after his father's funeral, Dae-hyun called her at 3 in the afternoon. He never called her at 3 in the afternoon. She picked up on the second ring. "Come to the mansion," he said. Now, why? Just come, take a car, don't drive. Dae-hyun, please." She took a car. The driver was a man she had never seen before. in a black suit, who did not speak to her once during the 40-minute ride out of the city, so she watched the back of his head. He had a small scar behind his right ear, almost invisible under the fade of his haircut. She made herself remember that too. 2 koi and a scar. She was building a small file in her head, and she did not yet know what she was building it for. The mansion gate opened before the car reached it. The driver pulled into the inner courtyard. He did not get out to open her door. She opened it herself. Sun Hee was waiting on the front steps. She was wearing the black tailleur, the long one, the one with the 7 covered buttons down the front. The Bordeaux silk scarf was knotted at her throat. The jade ring on her right hand caught the gray afternoon light and held it. She did not greet Isabella. "In the library," she said. The library was on the 2nd floor. Isabella had been in it twice in the 18 months since she had married into the family. Once for Christmas. Once for a charity reception. She knew the way. She climbed the stairs without looking at the housekeeper, who pretended not to see her. She walked the long carpet. The library door was open. Daehyun was inside. He was standing in front of his father's old desk. He was holding a single piece of paper in his left hand. The 2 consileros were sitting on the leather couch behind him. They both stood when Isabella entered. They had never stood for her before. Sun Hee came in behind Isabella and closed the door. The sound was small and final. "Sit," Sun Hee said. "I'll stand." "Sit, Isabella," Daehyun said. She sat. The chair was the same one that had been used for funerals. She knew that because she had asked the housekeeper at Christmas. The housekeeper, in her one moment of warmth toward Isabella, had told her, "This is the chair where bad news sits down." Isabella had laughed then. She did not laugh now. Daehyun put the paper on the desk in front of her. He did not look at her. He looked at the floor between her shoes. The paper was an email printout, headers and body. The sender address was hers, her real one, her work one, the one she used for the workshops. The recipient address was a string of letters and numbers, ending in a domain she did not recognize. The body was 3 lines in English. The 3 lines said she had taken money. They said the amount. They said the date. The amount was $300,000. The date was 2 weeks ago. She read the email twice. She put it down. She did not pick it up again. "This is not mine," she said. Daehyun did not answer. The older consigliero, the one with the thinnest glasses, slid a folder across the desk. Inside the folder were screenshots of text messages. Her phone number on one side, numbers she did not recognize on the other side. The messages were short, in English, in the kind of clipped tone she would never use. They named a place. They named a time. They named a price. There was also a bank statement. Her name, her account number. A deposit of $300,000 from a holding company she had never heard of. She looked at the bank statement for a long time. The deposit had cleared on a Tuesday. She had been in Newark that Tuesday. She had taught a workshop on resilience to 42 women in a community center where the heater had broken and they had all kept their coats on. She remembered every face. She did not remember signing anything. "Daehyun," she said. He did not look up. "Look at me." He did not. Sun Hee stepped forward and put her jade-ringed hand flat on the desk next to the printouts. She did not say anything. She did not have to. The arrangement of the papers said it for her. The papers were the verdict. The chair Isabella was sitting in was the sentence. "You don't believe this," Isabella said. Daehyun's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I don't know what to believe." "You don't know. There is a paper trail, Isabella. There is a manufactured paper trail. There is a deposit in your account. That I didn't make. $300,000 doesn't appear in someone's account. It does when someone puts it there." She stood up. She had not meant to. Her body did it for her. The chair scraped against the wood. The younger consigliero flinched. "Look at me," she said. He looked. His face was the face of a man who had not slept in a week. His eyes had the cracks she had only ever seen in clients in the deepest part of the work, when they were about to break in a useful way. He was not breaking in a useful way. He was breaking in the wrong direction. She watched him break in the wrong direction, and she felt, for the first time in their marriage, a thing she had not let herself feel before. She felt alone. "I did not take any money from anyone," she said, slowly, clearly. The voice she used in workshops, the one that carried to the back row without rising. "I do not know who any of these people are. I have not sent any of these messages. Someone in this house has made this. I will tell you who. If you give me 1 week. There is no week, son, he said. Isabella did not look at her. Dae-hyun, 1 week. Aomeoni is right, he said. The words came out like he was reading them. There is no week. Something inside Isabella made a small sound, a click, almost, like a lock turning the wrong way. She reached down. She slid her engagement ring off her finger. The wedding band came with it because the two had been welded together by the jeweler in Seoul, who had laughed and said, now you cannot lose one without losing the other. She had not lost one, she had lost both. She put the rings on the desk on top of the email printout. They covered the dollar amount perfectly. She had not aimed for that. She did not move them. Then there is nothing here for me, she said. She walked to the door. The younger consigliere made a small movement, as if to stop her. The older one shook his head once. He did not. She opened the door herself. She walked the long carpet back. She walked down the stairs. The housekeeper was at the bottom, and the housekeeper did not look at her. Isabella did not look at the housekeeper. She walked out the front door, across the courtyard, and there was no car waiting for her this time. She had known there would not be. She started walking down the long gravel drive in heels she had bought for the dinner that had told her, 18 months ago, exactly who she was in this house. Halfway to the gate, the gravel hurt her feet enough that she stopped. She took off both heels. She held them in her left hand. She kept walking. The iron gate slid open ahead of her with a small electric hum. Somebody inside the house had pressed a button. Somebody was watching her go. She walked through the gate. She walked along the road. After 10 minutes, a yellow cab passed in the other direction, saw her, made a U-turn at the next driveway, and came back. The driver was a man in his 60s with a Yankees cap. Lady, he said, you okay? No, she said. But I will be. She got in. She gave him her address. The cab smelled like coffee and pine air freshener. The driver glanced at her in the mirror twice in the first mile, then stopped glancing. He had the radio on low. A man on AM talked about traffic on the Long Island Expressway. Isabella listened to the man talk about traffic the way a person listens to rain on a roof. It was a sound to fill a head that did not want to be filled by the sound of itself. She thought about her mother in Atlanta, in the small brick house on the corner with the dogwood out front. Her mother who had said, when Isabella had first brought Dae-hyun home for Thanksgiving, that she liked him because he kept both hands on the table and looked her in the eye. Her mother who had cried at the wedding, quietly, into a handkerchief embroidered with her own mother's initials. Her mother who would have to be told something now, and Isabella did not yet know what she would tell her, only that it would have to be small enough to fit in a phone call and large enough to be true. She thought about the workshops. There was one scheduled for Thursday, 40 women in a basement in Bed-Stuy. She would do that workshop. She would do all of them. She would not let the small, sharp things under her ribs touch the work. The work was older than the marriage, and the work would outlive it. She did not cry in the cab. She did not cry that night either. She held the small, sharp thing under her ribs the way she had been holding it for almost 2 years, and now there was a second small, sharp thing next to it, and she carried them both home, and she put her key in the lock of the apartment that was about to stop being hers, and 3 days later she was already gone. 2 weeks after that, she sat on the closed lid of a toilet in a one-room studio in Queens, holding a plastic stick with 2 pink lines on it. And she understood that the small, sharp things under her ribs were going to have to wait. She had something else to carry now. The funeral for Kang Tae-woo was held on a cold gray morning in early October, and the entire Kang estate was draped in white. White lanterns hung from the eaves of the main house. White silk covered the long table in the dining hall where the family received guests. Every member of the household wore white hanbok, the traditional color of mourning, and Isabella Wright stood among them in a white linen dress she had bought the day before, her dark curls pulled back in a low knot at the base of her skull. She did not know how to stand at a Korean funeral. She kept her hands folded in front of her hips, the way Dae-hyun had shown her in the car. She bowed when he bowed. She knelt when he knelt. Her knees ached against the polished wood floor of the ancestral hall, and she watched the back of her husband's neck as he pressed his forehead to the ground in front of his father's portrait, and she thought, he is the patriarch now. The thought arrived without ceremony. It simply landed. Across the room, Kang Sun-hee knelt with her spine straight, her white hanbok arranged in perfect folds around her face calm and dry. She had not cried once. She had walked through 3 days of visitation, greeting elderly men in dark suits and accepting envelopes of condolence money, with the same controlled half-smile she wore at board meetings. She had directed the kitchen staff. She had arranged the seating chart for the dinner. She had moved through her husband's death the way a general moves through a battlefield. Isabella watched her and understood, finally, that grief in this house did not look like grief in the house she had grown up in. There would be no wailing, there would be no women clutching each other in the kitchen. There would be a redistribution of power, quiet and exact, and Isabella was standing in the path of it without armor. After the burial, the family gathered in the library. The 2 senior advisors were there, the same 2 old men who had watched her at her wedding 4 years earlier. Mr. Park with his thin gold glasses, Mr. Lim with his completely white hair. They wore dark gray suits now instead of mourning white, which Isabella did not know how to read. Daehyun sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Sun-hee sat at his right. Isabella sat at his left, because he had pulled the chair out for her himself before anyone else could speak. The advisors spoke in Korean. Daehyun answered in Korean. Sun-hee added short clipped sentences in Korean. Isabella understood perhaps 1 word in 20. She kept her face still. She had learned, over 4 years, that her face was always being read in this house, and that the safest expression was the one that revealed nothing. After an hour, Daehyun turned to her and said in English, "They are discussing the holdings, the hotels, the properties. We will be here a while. You should rest." She nodded. She rose. She did not look at Sun-hee as she left the room, but she felt the older woman's eyes follow her to the door and stay there until the door closed. In the hallway, she leaned her forehead against the cool plaster wall and breathed. She had been holding her breath without knowing it for the entire hour. Her ribs hurt, her jaw hurt. She walked back to the suite she shared with Daehyun on the 2nd floor, and she sat on the edge of the bed and removed her shoes one at a time, and she did not cry, because crying in this house felt like asking permission for something no one would ever grant. That night, Daehyun did not come to bed until almost 3 in the morning. He undressed in the dark. He slid under the covers and put one hand on her hip, and she could feel the cold of the library still on his fingers. "My father wanted me to be careful with the hotels," he said into the dark. "He thought I would expand too fast." "Will you?" "No. I will expand exactly as fast as I planned." A pause. "I will not let him be right about me from the grave." She rolled toward him. In the moonlight from the high window, she could see the line of his jaw, the small inclined corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile. "And your mother?" she asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My mother loved my father. She will need time. And me? You are my wife." "That is not what I asked." He sighed. He pulled her against his chest and pressed his chin to the top of her head. "Give her time, Isabella. She has lost the only man she ever loved. She will find a way to be kind to you, I promise." She did not answer. She listened to his heart through the thin cotton of his sleep shirt, and she thought, he is the patriarch now, and he does not yet understand what that means. He thinks he is still the son. He thinks his mother is still grieving. He does not see that her grief is a hammer, and she has already chosen who to swing it at. 3 weeks passed. In those 3 weeks, the household subtly rearranged itself around Sun-hee. The kitchen staff began consulting her first about every meal, then Isabella second, then sometimes not at all. The driver began waiting for Sun-hee's schedule before confirming Isabella's. The housekeeper began knocking on Isabella's door at unusual hours, asking permission to enter rooms she had previously entered freely. None of it was loud. None of it was a thing Isabella could point to and name. She mentioned none of it to Daehyun. He was working 16-hour days. He came home gray-faced and ate dinner standing at the kitchen island and went straight to his father's old study to read contracts until 2 in the morning. She would not add to his weight. She told herself she could outlast a grieving mother-in-law. She told herself she had outlasted worse things. On a Tuesday in late October, Sun-hee invited her to tea in the morning room. It was the first time in 3 weeks that Sun-hee had spoken directly to her, without an instruction attached. Isabella accepted. She wore a soft cream sweater and dark jeans. She arrived at 10. The room smelled of jasmine and old paper. Sun-hee poured the tea herself. Her hands were perfectly steady. The jade ring on her right hand caught the lamplight when she set the pot down. "You must miss your work," Sun-hee said in careful English. "Your speaking engagements." Isabella took the cup. "A little. I will return to them when things settle. Of course, a woman should have her own purpose. I have always believed this." Sun-hee lifted her own cup with both hands. "I had my own purpose once. Before I married. What did you do? I was going to be a translator at the United Nations. A small smile. French, English, Korean, Japanese. I was very gifted. My mother told me a woman with 4 languages could go anywhere in the world. She sipped. She set the cup down with no sound. Then I met Tae-woo, and I learned that a woman with 4 languages goes exactly where her husband's family tells her to go. Isabella did not know what to say. She said, "I'm sorry. Don't be. I made a choice. I built something. I built this." Sun-hee gestured at the room, at the house, at the unseen empire beyond it. "I built my son. I built my husband's name into something the whole peninsula respects." She paused. "I will not let it be undone." A small cold thing moved in Isabella's chest. She kept her face still. "I would never undo it." "No, I do not think you mean to." Sun-hee's eyes lifted. They were dark and almost kind. "But you do not understand what you have walked into. You think this is a marriage. It is not a marriage. It is a position, and the position requires things you cannot give." "Like what?" Sun-hee did not answer that. She lifted her cup again. She drank. She set it down. She said, in the same careful, almost gentle tone, "I have been very patient, Isabella. I would like you to remember that I have been very patient." Isabella set her own cup down. The tea was untouched. "Mother," she said. She had been instructed, from the wedding day, to use that word. "If you have something to say to me, please say it." Sun-hee looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled the small, controlled smile, and she said, "I have nothing to say to you today. Thank you for the tea." Isabella rose. She walked out of the morning room. In the hallway, her hands were shaking, and she could not tell whether it was fear or fury, and she decided, then and there, that she would tell Dae-hyun that night. She did not get the chance. That afternoon, while Isabella was at a yoga class in the city, Sun-hee went into the second-floor suite. She brought Mr. Park and Mr. Lim with her. She brought a small black laptop. The 3 of them sat at the antique writing desk in the corner of the room, and they worked in complete silence for almost 2 hours. Mr. Park was a man who had spent 40 years moving money through 10 countries on behalf of the Kang family. He knew how to make a deposit appear to originate from a numbered account in Macau. He knew how to backdate a wire transfer by 6 weeks and have the bank confirm it. The deposit he created that afternoon was for $140,000 US. It landed in a personal checking account in Isabella Wright's name at a Midtown bank, an account Isabella had opened 2 years earlier and barely used. The originating wire was traced to a shell company in the Cayman Islands that, on paper, was owned by a competing hospitality group out of Singapore, the same competing group that had been quietly trying to buy out the Imperial Nara Hotel for the last 18 months. Mr. Lim was a man who had spent 30 years writing other people's letters. He drafted a series of 17 emails, sent over the previous 4 months from an address constructed to look like Isabella's personal Gmail, to an address constructed to look like the personal Gmail of the competing group's CFO. The emails discussed Kang property valuations, internal pricing memos, 3 confidential acquisition targets, and 1 off-the-books offshore account number that Tae-woo had set up before his death. The metadata was perfect. The IP addresses traced back, alternately, to a coffee shop 2 blocks from Isabella's old apartment in Brooklyn, and to the yoga studio she attended in the city. Mr. Lim had been compiling Isabella's movements for 6 weeks. Sun-hee herself wrote the text messages. There were 4 of them, on a burner phone she had purchased the previous Friday. They appeared, on the cloned device they planted in Isabella's nightstand, as a thread between Isabella and a contact saved only as J. The messages were short. They talked about a meeting at a hotel in Long Island City. They talked about money. The last message, sent at 3 in the morning on the night of Tae-woo's funeral, said, simply, "He is distracted now, move soon." When they were finished, the 3 of them gathered their things. Sun-hee adjusted the angle of the lamp on the writing desk by exactly half an inch, restoring it to where it had been. She straightened the silk runner. She inspected the room from the doorway for 1 full minute. Then she nodded once to the 2 old men, and they left, and the door closed behind them with a small, soft click. That night, Dae-hyun came home at 9. This was unusually early. He stood in the foyer in his black overcoat with his hand still on the door, and he looked at Isabella, who was coming down the stairs in jeans and a soft gray sweater, and his face was a thing she had never seen before. There was no softness in it. There was no welcome. There was a kind of careful, empty attention, the way a man looks at a witness he is about to question. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay." In the library, she followed him. Sun-hee was already there. seated on the long velvet couch by the cold fireplace, her hands folded in her lap. The two advisors were standing against the bookshelves. The laptop was open on the low table between them. There was a small stack of printed pages beside it. Isabella stopped in the doorway. She understood, before a single word was spoken, that something had happened, and that whatever it was had already been decided. Daehyun walked to the table. He did not sit. He turned the laptop toward her. "Sit down, Isabella." She sat. She looked at the screen. It showed a bank statement. Her name was at the top. The amount was highlighted in yellow. $140,000. Deposited 11 days earlier, from a sender she did not recognize. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Read the next one." He clicked. Emails appeared. She read 3 of them, before her hands began to tremble against her thighs. She read 4 more. She looked up at him. "Daehyun, I did not write these. Your address. It is not my address. Look at the domain. Look at the... My team has checked the domain. The headers route correctly. The IP addresses are from your locations. That is not possible." Her voice was rising, and she could not stop it. "I have never met anyone from that company. I do not even know what that company is." "Lansing Hospitality," he said. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped onto a glass table. "Out of Singapore. They have been trying to take the Nara from me for a year and a half. My father warned me about them on his deathbed. He told me, watch the woman they send. He thought they would send a woman. Daehyun, listen to me, look at me." She stood. She came around the table toward him. He did not step back. He did not step forward. He simply held the laptop between them like a shield. "I have never spoken to anyone from any hospitality company in Singapore or anywhere else. I have not spoken to a single person about your business in 4 years. I do not know what your hotel is worth. I do not know what an off-the-books offshore account is. I have not deposited $140,000 anywhere. Someone has done this to me." "Who?" She looked past him. She looked at Sun-hee. Sun-hee was watching her with the same controlled expression she had worn at the funeral. There was, perhaps, the smallest possible smile at the corners of her mouth. Perhaps it was a trick of the firelight. Perhaps it was not. "Her," Isabella said. Her voice was very quiet. "Your mother did this, Daehyun. Your mother is doing this." Sun-hee did not move. She did not protest. She simply turned her head slowly toward Daehyun and waited. Daehyun closed his eyes for one long second. When he opened them, something inside them had shifted. Not toward her. Away. "My mother," he said, "has been managing this family's accounts for 40 years without a single discrepancy. My mother buried my father 11 days ago. My mother has not spent 1 minute alone with a banker or an attorney since the funeral. My mother does not know how to forge an email. She knows how to ask someone to forge an email. Be very careful, Isabella." "I am being careful. I am telling you the truth. The truth is that I have not done this, and someone in this house has. My father warned me." His voice was flat. He was not looking at her face anymore. He was looking at her left shoulder. On the last day, when he could barely speak, he said, "The boy will marry love over duty, and the family will pay." I told him he was wrong. I told him you were not like that. I am not like that. Then explain the money. I cannot explain the money because I did not deposit the money. Explain the phone. He reached past her. He lifted a small black phone off the table. It was not her phone. It looked like her phone. The case was the same, a soft pink silicone with a small chip in the corner, where she had dropped it on the bathroom tile 2 summers ago. He thumbed it open. The screen showed a thread with the contact J. The last message glowed. "He is distracted now. Move soon." She stared at the phone. She stared at the chip in the corner of the case. They had matched the chip. They had matched the chip exactly. The detail of it was what finally moved the fear in her chest into a colder, harder thing. "That is not my phone," she said softly. "It was in your nightstand. It was put in my nightstand." "By whom?" "By the woman sitting behind you." She watched his jaw harden. She watched the small inclined corner of his mouth, the family smile, the one that was never quite a smile, flatten into a straight, cold line. "Get out of this room," he said. "Go upstairs, pack a small bag. Mr. Park will drive you to a hotel. You will stay there until I decide what is to be done. Do not take anything from this house that did not belong to you when you arrived. Do not touch my mother. Do not speak to my mother. Do not speak to the staff. Walk to the car. Get in. Go. Daehyun. Now." She did not move. She could not move. She looked at him and she understood, with a clarity that arrived too late to save anything, that he had already decided before she walked into the room. The talk had been a formality. The evidence had been the conviction. She had walked into a courtroom dressed as a living room, and the verdict had already been written on the back of her chair. She slid her left hand into her right palm. She closed her fingers around her wedding ring. It was platinum, set with a single old European-cut diamond that had belonged to Daehyun's grandmother on his father's side. She worked it slowly over the knuckle. Her hands had grown thinner in the last 3 weeks without her noticing. The ring came off easily. She set it on the low table beside the laptop. She set it down with great care, the way one sets down something that has been broken and might break further if dropped. She looked at Sun-hee. "You will not get away with this forever," she said. Her voice did not shake. "I do not know how long. I do not know what shape it takes, but you will not." Sun-hee did not answer. She lifted her chin a fraction of an inch. That was all. Isabella turned. She walked out of the library. She climbed the wide staircase to the second floor. In the suite she shared with Daehyun, she took a small canvas weekend bag from the top of the closet. She put in 3 pairs of underwear, 2 t-shirts, 1 pair of jeans, the soft gray sweater she was already wearing a duplicate of, her toothbrush, her hairbrush, a small bottle of the rosewater face spray she liked. She left every dress. She left every piece of jewelry. She left the cashmere coat Daehyun had given her for her 30th birthday. She left the photographs on the dresser, including the one of the 2 of them in Jeju on their honeymoon, his arm around her waist, his face open and laughing in a way she would not see again for 4 years. In the bathroom she stood at the mirror for 1 long minute. The woman in the mirror had brown skin and dark eyes and a long wave of black hair falling over one shoulder, and her mouth was set in a hard straight line, and her chin was lifted, and there were no tears anywhere on her face. Good, Isabella thought. Good, we will cry later. We will cry where they cannot see. She zipped the bag. She walked down the stairs. Mr. Park was waiting in the foyer with the front door already open. He did not look at her face. He took the bag from her hand and walked out to the black sedan in the circular drive. Isabella followed him. The October air was cold and smelled of cut grass and wood smoke from somewhere far off down the lane. In the car, she sat in the back seat with her hands flat on her thighs. The driver pulled around the fountain and down the long drive toward the gates. She did not look back at the house. She looked straight ahead at the back of Mr. Park's neck, at the gray hair clipped neat above his collar, and she counted the streetlights as they passed. And she did not let herself think about the shape of her husband's mouth when he said the word now. At a midtown hotel on 57th Street, Mr. Park walked her to the front desk. A room had already been booked under her name. He handed her a key card and a thin white envelope. He bowed slightly, almost respectfully, and he left. In the room, she sat on the edge of the made bed in her gray sweater, with her canvas bag at her feet. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper with the Kang family seal at the top and 3 short lines of typed English. "You will vacate this hotel within 72 hours. You will not contact Mr. Kang. You will not contact any member of the household. A separate communication will follow regarding the dissolution of the marriage." There was no signature. There did not need to be one. She set the paper down on the bedside table. She placed her palms flat against her knees. She breathed in for 4 counts. She breathed out for 6. She did this 7 times. On the 8th breath, something inside her chest let go, and she bent forward over her own thighs and pressed her face into her own hands and made a single small sound that was not quite a word and not quite a cry, and then she straightened up again and wiped her face with the back of her wrist and stood. She walked to the window. The city was huge and lit and indifferent below her. Somewhere out there were people she had loved before she became a Kang, her younger sister in Atlanta, 2 cousins in Queens, a woman from her college roommate days who had told her, at the wedding, "You can always come home, Bella, you know that, right?" She had laughed at the time. She had not needed to come home. She had been so sure. She did not call any of them that night. She sat in the dark in the chair by the window, and she watched the lights of the cars moving down the avenue, and she thought about the small inclined corner of her husband's mouth flattening into a straight line, and she thought about the jade ring catching the lamplight on Sun-hee's hand, and she made a list in her mind of all the things she would have to do, in order, starting in the morning. Find a lawyer. Find a smaller place. Find work that did not require any reference from the Kang family. Find a way to walk through the next month without breaking in any way that would show. She did not yet know about the small, sharp things that had begun, 2 weeks earlier, to gather under her ribs. She did not yet know that the list she was making in the dark hotel room would have to be remade, very soon, around a much smaller and much heavier life. She slept that night in her clothes on top of the made bed, and she did not dream, and at 4 in the morning she woke once and reached across the cool, empty sheet for a husband who was not there and would not be there, and she pulled her hand back, and she pressed it flat against her own sternum, and she did not let herself make a sound. Outside the window, the city kept moving. The world did not pause for the quiet ending of a marriage in a hotel room on 57th Street. It rarely does. It simply turns, and asks the broken thing inside the room to find some way to stand up by morning. 2 weeks after that, she sat on the closed lid of a toilet in a one-room studio in Queens, holding a plastic stick with 2 pink lines on it, and she understood that the small, sharp things under her ribs were going to have to wait. She had something else to carry now. She sat there for a long time. The bathroom light was the kind that hums, a small electrical insect of a sound, and the tile under her bare feet was cold, in the way that cheap tile is cold, which is the cold of a place that has never been loved by anyone. She held the plastic stick between her thumb and her index finger, and she turned it once, slowly, the way a person turns a key in a lock that they are afraid to open. 2 pink lines, not 1, 2. She did not cry. That was the first thing she noticed about herself, the absence of crying, the strange, dry stillness inside her chest. She had cried for 2 weeks. She had cried in the back of a yellow cab the night she walked out of the Kang house, with 1 suitcase and a coat that did not belong to the weather. She had cried in the bathroom of a diner on Northern Boulevard, while the waitress pretended not to hear. She had cried on the floor of this same studio apartment the first night, on a mattress that had no sheets yet, with the city sound coming through the window like somebody else's argument. But now there was nothing, just the hum of the light and the cold of the tile, and 2 small pink lines that had decided her life for her, without asking. She stood up. The studio was 1 room, kitchen against the back wall, bed in the corner, a folding chair, a small table she had bought at a thrift store on Steinway Street for $11. She walked from the bathroom to the table, and she sat down in the folding chair, and she put the test in the middle of the table, the way a person sets down a piece of evidence. Then she put both hands flat on the wood on either side of it, and she breathed. She thought of Daehyun's mouth, not the mouth that had spat at her in the library 3 weeks before. The other mouth, the one from the rooftop in the early spring, the one that had said the word father like a man saying a prayer he had not been allowed to say out loud. She thought of his small, crooked smile, the one that went up only on the right side, the one his mother had also and his uncles had also, a family signature stitched into the muscle of the face. She thought, this baby is going to have that smile. She thought it the way a person thinks a fact, not a hope, and she sat very still and let the fact settle into her like a stone settling into the bottom of a river. Then she stood up and she made a list. She wrote it on the back of a takeout menu, in pen, because she did not yet own a notebook. Doctor, job, different neighborhood, different name on the lease, no social media, no old friends, don't tell anyone, especially him, especially her. She underlined the her 3 times. The pen tore the paper a little. She found a clinic in Jackson Heights that took walk-ins. She rode the 7 train 2 stops with her hood up and her hands in her pockets, and she did not look at anyone. The doctor was a small woman from Bangladesh with very kind eyes and the kind of voice that did not ask too many questions. She confirmed the pregnancy. 7 weeks, she said, healthy. The baby will be born in spring. Isabella nodded the way a person nods at weather forecasts. She paid in cash. She walked back to the train. On the platform, a man was playing a saxophone, badly, and she stood and listened to him for a long time because she did not know what else to do with her body. That night the sogra came. Isabella was at the small table eating instant noodles out of the pot because she had not bought bowls yet, and there was a knock at the door. 2 knocks, very precise, the second exactly the same weight as the first. She knew before she stood up. Her body knew. The skin at the back of her neck knew. She put down the fork. She walked to the door. She did not open it. She put her eye to the peephole. Kang Sun-hee stood in the hallway of a building she did not belong in. Black silk hanbok, modern cut, burgundy embroidery at the chest, the small pearl earrings, the jade ring on the right hand. Her white-streaked hair was pulled back into the same low, impeccable bun she had worn at every dinner Isabella had ever sat through in that house. Behind her, 2 paces back, stood a man in a black suit with a wire in his ear. The hallway light above them flickered once and did not flicker again. Isabella opened the door 6 inches. She did not unlatch the chain. Sun He smiled. It was not a smile. It was the arrangement of a mouth into the shape of a smile. "May I come in?" she said. Her English was beautiful and precise and contained no question mark at the end of the sentence. "No," Isabella said. The smile did not move. "Then we will talk like this." Sun He folded her hands in front of her, the jade ring resting on top of the other hand. "I have been told something. I would like to know if it is true." Her eyes moved down once, very briefly, to Isabella's stomach and back up. "Is it?" Isabella did not answer. Her hand on the door felt like somebody else's hand. "I will speak plainly," Sun He said. "There is no child of the Kang house growing in the body of a woman who is no longer of this house. That is a sentence I am saying out loud so that you can hear it once and only once. Do you understand the sentence?" "Get away from my door," Isabella said. Her voice was quiet. She was surprised by how quiet it was. Sun He tilted her head. "You think I came to threaten you?" She let the words sit. "I came to make you an offer. There is a sum of money. It is a large sum of money. It is more money than you will ever see again in your life. It is in an envelope in the car downstairs. You sign one piece of paper. You go to a clinic of your choosing. You do not contact my son. You do not contact this family. You do not exist after Tuesday. That is the offer." Isabella heard her own breath. It was slower than she expected. "And if I say no," she said. Sun He's smile finally moved. It went a little smaller, a little tighter, the corners pulling in. "Then there will be no offer," she said. "There will only be the thing that happens after the offer is refused. I do not need to describe that thing. You are an intelligent woman. You have been in our house. You have seen the men who eat at our table. You know what they are. You know what they can do. I do not need to describe it. I am asking you not to make me describe it." Isabella looked at her for a long time through the 6-inch gap. "You came up here yourself," Isabella said. "You did not send a lawyer. You did not send a man with an envelope. You came yourself. You climbed 3 flights of stairs in those shoes. Why?" Sun He blinked once. It was the first crack Isabella had ever seen in her, the smallest of cracks, the kind that closes again before the eye can be sure it saw it. "Because some things," Sun He said, "must be ended by the hand that started them." "You did not start anything," Isabella said. "I started this, with him, in a garden, 4 years ago. You only tried to end it. You are still trying, and you will keep trying, and you will not succeed. Because I am leaving tonight, and you will not find me, and the thing inside me is mine, and it is his, only by accident of blood, which is the only kind of blood you understand. Now move your foot." Sun He had not moved her foot. Isabella looked down. The tip of one black silk shoe was inside the threshold, holding the door open 1/4 of an inch more than Isabella had wanted. Sun He looked down at the foot too, slowly, as if she were noticing it for the first time. Then she stepped back. The door swung the 1/4 inch shut. "Tuesday," Sun He said through the wood. "The offer expires Tuesday." Isabella closed the door. She turned the deadbolt. She turned the chain. She walked back to the table. She sat down. The instant noodles had gone cold in the pot. She looked at them for a moment. Then she stood up again, and she walked to the closet, and she pulled the suitcase off the shelf, and she began, very methodically, to pack. She left the apartment at 4 in the morning. She left the lease unbroken and the last month's rent in an envelope on the table with a note that said sorry, and she walked 6 blocks with the suitcase to a bus stop on Astoria Boulevard, and she took a city bus to Port Authority, and at Port Authority she bought a one-way ticket on a Greyhound to a city in the middle of the country, paid in cash, used a name that was not exactly her name, and she sat in the back of the bus with her hood up and her hand flat on her stomach the whole 26 hours. The city does not matter. She would tell you 4 years later, sitting on a stage with a microphone clipped to a black blazer, that the city does not matter. That what mattered was that it was a city where no Kang had ever set foot and no Kang had any reason to. A flat city, a working city, a city of warehouses and breakfast diners and one good public library. She rented a room above a Vietnamese bakery from a woman who did not ask questions and accepted 4 months up front in cash. The bakery smell came up through the floorboards every morning at 5, sugar and butter and pandan, and for a long time it was the first thing she was glad of in any given day. She did the things a woman does. She found a doctor who took a state insurance card she had to fight to get. She found a job at a call center selling extended warranties on appliances, headset on, voice bright, 8 hours a day. She worked until her belly was too big to fit comfortably under the desk, and then she worked 2 more weeks past that, and then she stopped. Because the supervisor, a man named Marcus with kind eyes and a wedding ring he turned on his finger when he was nervous, said, "Please go home. You have earned it. Come back when you are ready." She went home. 3 days later, in a hospital room with green walls and a nurse from Lagos who held her hand and called her sister, she pushed Elias right into the world. He came out quiet. The doctor frowned for half a second, the kind of half second that is the longest half second of a mother's life, and then the baby took a breath and let it out. Not as a scream, but as a small, considered exhale, as if he had decided breathing was a thing he was willing to try. They put him on her chest. She looked down. She saw the small, wet face, the smashed nose, the dark hair stuck flat to the head in wet curls, the eyes shut tight against the light. And then he opened his eyes once, just once, dark and almond and single-lidded, and he looked at her, and the right corner of his small mouth pulled up by itself, into a smile that was not a baby smile, that was older than him, that belonged to a man in a 3-piece suit on the other side of the world. And Isabella made a sound she did not know her body could make, a sound that was a laugh and a sob at the same time. And the nurse from Lagos squeezed her hand and said, "Oh, sister, oh, he is beautiful." She named him Elias because it meant the Lord is my God, and she needed a name that belonged entirely to her side of his blood. She gave him her last name, Wright. On the birth certificate, in the box that said father, she wrote unknown. The pen shook. She wrote it anyway. The first year was the hardest year of her life, and she will never lie about that. She fed him in the dark. She slept in pieces. She washed cloth diapers in a sink because the laundromat downstairs cost $3 a load, and $3 a load adds up. She lost 10 pounds she did not have to lose. She found them again on a diet of rice and eggs, and the day-old bread the woman from the bakery left at her door without comment. Twice she sat on the bathroom floor, at 3 in the morning, with the baby asleep in the crook of her arm, and she thought about calling him. She thought about it the way a person thinks about a cliff, with a kind of dizzy curiosity. She did not call. She had a flip phone she had bought at a gas station, and the only number programmed into it was the pediatrician's. She liked it that way. She kept it that way. By the time Elias was 18 months old, she was working 2 jobs. The call center in the day, a second shift 3 nights a week at a hotel front desk downtown. The kind of mid-range hotel where traveling salesmen sleep, and nobody asks questions of the woman behind the counter as long as she smiles. She worked the 11 to 7. She read a lot of books between 3 and 5 in the morning when the lobby was empty. Paperbacks from the library across the street, biographies mostly, women who had built things, women who had walked out of houses and built things. She started to make notes in the margins. Not many, just the lines that felt like they had been written about her. One night a guest checked in at 2 in the morning, a woman in her 50s, well-dressed, eyes swollen the way a person's eyes are swollen when they have been crying for hours in a car. She put her credit card on the counter and her hand was shaking, and Isabella, without thinking, reached across the counter and put her own hand flat over the woman's hand. She did not say anything. She held the hand for maybe 10 seconds. Then she let go, and she ran the card, and she gave the woman a key. The next morning, the woman came back down before checkout, and she stood at the desk a long time, and finally she said, "What you did last night, that small thing, that saved my life last night. I want you to know that." And she walked out. Isabella stood there with the room key in her hand for a long time after the elevator doors closed. That was the day it started. The thing that would become the work. She did not know it was starting. Nobody ever knows. She just noticed, that week, that she kept thinking about the woman, and about her own hand on the woman's hand, and about how small that gesture had been, and how much it had apparently weighed. She started writing things down, not in the margins of library books anymore. In a notebook she bought for $2 at a drugstore. She wrote about what it had felt like to walk out of the Kang house. She wrote about the bathroom floor and the 2 pink lines. She wrote about the sogra in the hallway and the foot in the door. She wrote about the first time Elias smiled at her and the sound her body had made. She wrote in the dark, in the hotel lobby, between guests, in handwriting that got smaller as the years went on, as if she were trying to fit more truth on each page. When Elias was 3, she stopped working the night shift. She had enough saved. She rented a small office, 1 room with 1 window and 1 desk, above a yoga studio, and she put a sign on the door that said only her name, Isabella Wright. Underneath, in smaller letters, Conversations. That was all. No promise, no credential, just the word. She put a post on a free community board online. She wrote, I am a woman who left a hard place. I am the mother of a small boy. I have learned a few things about standing back up. If you are sitting on a bathroom floor tonight, you can come see me on Thursday. The first hour is free. Bring the floor with you. We will look at it together. 4 women came that Thursday. The next Thursday it was 7. By the end of the second month, she had to move the chairs into a circle because there were not enough seats along the walls. By the end of the year, a woman who ran a small podcast in the city interviewed her for 40 minutes, and the interview got picked up by a larger podcast, and the larger podcast got picked up by a women's magazine, and the magazine ran a piece with a photograph of her sitting on the floor of the small office with her legs crossed and Elias asleep on the cushion behind her, the small crooked smile on his small sleeping face. And the headline said, The Woman Who Teaches Other Women How to Leave. She did not love the headline. She thought it made her sound like a locksmith. But she let it run, because Elias needed shoes, and the speaking invitations started coming in after that piece. And the speaking invitations paid in a way the office hours did not. $300 the first one, $800 the next, $1,500 by the end of that year. She wore the same black blazer to every one of them, because it was the only good blazer she owned. And she wore it with a black cropped top underneath, and high-waisted black leggings and white sneakers with high white socks. Because that was what she could move in, that was what let her walk the stage without thinking about the clothes. And after a while the outfit became a kind of trademark. The journalists wrote about it, the audience expected it, and she let them, because it cost her nothing, and it meant she did not have to shop. She told her story in pieces. Never all of it. She never said the word Korea on stage. She never said the word Kang. She talked about a house she had once lived in, a marriage she had once been inside, a mother-in-law who had once stood in a hallway. She talked about the moment she had taken off a ring and put it on a table. She talked about a bathroom floor and a plastic stick. She did not talk about the night the Sogra had put a black silk shoe inside her threshold, because that part still belonged only to her. She did not talk about the boy's father by any name. When women in the audience asked, and they always asked, she would smile a small, careful smile, and she would say, That man is a story for a different evening, and tonight is not that evening, and the women would nod and let it go, because they had come for their own story and not for hers. She built the life slowly. A 2-bedroom apartment, 3rd floor, walk up, on a street with trees. A small gym membership at a place 2 blocks away, where she went 4 mornings a week before Elias woke up, because the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. And the body wanted to be strong. A preschool for Elias with kind teachers and a tiny garden and a hamster named Mr. Biscuits. A used car, a sedan, gray, paid for in cash. A college fund she put $50 into every Friday afternoon without fail. A passport for Elias, which she kept in a drawer in her bedroom, and which she looked at sometimes the way a person looks at a fire extinguisher, not because she expected to use it, but because she wanted to know it was there. She did not date. Men asked. Men ask a beautiful woman who stands alone on a stage and tells the truth. And they asked her in coffee shops and after talks and once in the cereal aisle of a grocery store, and she said no, gently, every time. Elias was 4 now, and Elias had the right corner of his mouth pulled up in that small, crooked smile every time he was pleased. And Elias was enough company, and the work was enough company, and the quiet of her own kitchen at the end of a long day was the closest thing to safety she had felt since she was 25, and she was not willing to trade any of it for the hands of a stranger. She had stopped by then, thinking about Daehyun every day. It had taken 3 years. The first year she had thought about him hourly, the second year, daily, the third year, weekly. By the 4th year she could go 10 days without his face surfacing in her, and when it surfaced, she could look at it the way a person looks at an old scar in a mirror, with a kind of distant ownership, with the small surprise of remembering that the body had once been opened in that exact place. What she could not stop, what she would never stop, was watching Elias, watching him sleep, watching him eat his cereal with the careful attention of a small accountant, watching him line up his 3 favorite trucks on the kitchen floor, watching him hold the small red metal car he had picked out himself at a flea market when he was 3, and had not let go of since. The red car that was already a little dented, The red car he carried everywhere. The red car he set on the breakfast table every morning between the salt and the pepper, as if it were a small, loyal animal that needed a place at the meal. Every time he picked up the red car and looked at it and smiled that small, crooked smile, the right side of his small mouth pulling up alone, Isabella felt the bathroom floor under her bare feet again. The hum of the cheap light, the cold tile, the two pink lines, the absolute certainty that had risen up in her chest, and she would close her eyes for one breath and open them, and there he was, 4 years old, with his father's mouth and her own eyes, holding a small red car, asking her if they could go to the park. That was the spring of the 4th year. That was the spring she accepted a speaking invitation in another city, a city she had not been to before, a city she had once promised herself she would never set foot in again, because a man she used to know kept the headquarters of his empire there. The invitation came from a wellness conference at a hotel called the Imperial Nara. The fee was $15,000. She read the email twice. She read the name of the hotel 3 times. Then she walked into the kitchen, where Elias was sitting on the floor, pushing the small red car along the line where the tile met the wall, making engine sounds with his small, serious mouth, and she stood in the doorway and she watched him for a long minute. He looked up, he saw her watching. The right corner of his mouth pulled up, by itself, into the small, crooked smile. "Mama," he said, "can we go on an airplane?" She did not answer right away. She stood in the doorway, and she felt, for the first time in 4 years, the very small, specific cold of a sogra's foot inside a threshold. She felt it, and she let it pass through her and out the other side, and she breathed once. The slow breath she had taught hundreds of women on hundreds of stages to take before they answered a hard question, and she smiled at her son, and she said, "Yes, baby. We can go on an airplane. Mama has some work to do in a big city, and you are coming with me, and we are going to stay in a very fancy hotel, and you can bring the red car, and we are going to be just fine." She did not know yet. She could not have known yet, but the small red car in her son's small hand was already, that morning, beginning to roll, very slowly, across 4 years of careful silence, toward a pair of polished black Oxford shoes standing in the lobby of a hotel on the other side of the country, and the man inside those shoes did not know it yet either, and the woman in the black silk hanbok in a house high above the city did not know it yet either, and only the red car knew, and the red car was not telling. The red car rolled across the polished marble of the Imperial Nara Hotel lobby in a long, unhurried diagonal, and for a small slice of a second nobody moved to stop it. It crossed a vein of black stone inlaid in the cream floor. It crossed the soft circle of light from the central chandelier. It crossed the reflection of a tall white orchid arrangement that stood in a tall black vase near the concierge desk, and then it stopped, the way small metal things stop, with a tiny dry click against the side of a polished black Oxford shoe. The Oxford shoe belonged to Kang Dae-hyun. He was standing in the center of the lobby with his back almost turned to the entrance, his 3-piece black suit perfect on his shoulders, the white collar of his shirt cutting a clean horizontal line beneath his jaw, the thin black tie falling straight down his chest. 2 advisors stood half a step behind him, gray suits, thin glasses, white hair cut short. A man in a black suit with a discreet earpiece stood near the elevators. Another stood near the front doors. They were all listening to Dae-hyun. He was speaking in low Korean about an acquisition. His left wrist turned once, and the silver watch caught the light. Then the small red thing touched his shoe, and the low Korean stopped mid-syllable. Dae-hyun did not look down right away. He let the silence sit for one full beat. His right hand, the hand with the heavy signet ring, lifted slightly from his side. The advisors stopped breathing. The bodyguard near the elevators took half a step forward and then stopped because Dae-hyun had not given any signal. Then Dae-hyun looked down. A small red metal car, a little dented on one side, a scratch along the roof, one wheel slightly bent, the kind of car a child carries everywhere and forgets to put down. It sat against the polished toe of his shoe like it had been placed there on purpose. He did not bend to pick it up. He raised his eyes instead and followed the line the car had taken, back across the marble, back across the black vein in the stone, back across the soft pool of chandelier light, all the way to where it had started. It had started at the feet of a small boy. The boy was 4, maybe a little under 4. He was standing in the middle of the lobby with both hands now empty and one foot half lifted, the way children stand when they have just let go of something and are not sure yet if they are in trouble. He wore a cream linen shirt, short sleeves, the collar a little crooked because he had dressed himself that morning, and his mother had only fixed it halfway. He wore small dark trousers and small brown loafers. His hair was a soft brown coffee, wavy, falling over his forehead. His skin was warm gold. He was looking straight at Daehyun. He was not afraid. He was tilting his head a little to one side, the way someone tilts their head when they are reading a word they almost recognize. And then the boy smiled. It was a small smile. It was a contained smile. It pulled up only on the right side of his mouth. It was cold, the way a clean blade is cold. Not cruel, just precise. It was a smile that did not belong on a 4-year-old face. It was a smile that belonged on a portrait in a hallway in a house high above the city, on the face of a man who had been dead for almost a year, and on the face of his son, who was standing in the lobby of the Imperial Nara Hotel right now. The advisor on the left made a small sound in his throat. The other advisor did not move. Daehyun's own face did not change. His own face almost never changed. But somewhere under the perfect black wool of his jacket, between his ribs, something inside him hitched, the way a watch hitches when a tiny piece of grit gets into the gears. He looked at the small red car against his shoe. He looked at the boy. He did not say anything yet. From the far side of the lobby, a woman's voice called, soft and clear, "Elias." The boy did not turn at his name. The boy was still looking at Daehyun. The boy lifted one small hand and pointed at the car at Daehyun's foot and said, in a 4-year-old's solemn voice, "That's mine." The advisor on the left exhaled through his nose. Daehyun bent. He bent the way he did everything, in a single clean line, no wasted motion. He picked the small red car up between his thumb and his first finger. He held it close to his face for a second. He turned it once. The bent wheel turned with a tiny soft tick. The scratch on the roof caught the chandelier light. There was a smudge of something on the side, jam maybe, dried for days. The smell of the lobby was lilies and lemon polish and somewhere far away coffee. Daehyun straightened. He held the car flat on his open palm. He extended his hand toward the boy, and then the woman's voice came again, closer this time, no longer soft. "Elias, come here now." She stepped out from between 2 tall white columns at the edge of the lobby, and the air in the room changed shape around her. Isabella Wright. She was wearing a black cropped top and black high-waisted leggings and white sneakers and high white socks. She had come from a wellness session upstairs. Her hair, very long, very dark, almost black, fell over one shoulder in soft, wide waves. Her skin was deep, warm brown under the chandelier light. Her waist was small, her shoulders square, her stride even. She was beautiful, the way a knife is beautiful when it is held at the correct angle. She was walking fast. She had not yet seen who the man in the 3-piece suit was. She had only seen her son standing alone in the middle of a hotel lobby in front of a stranger, and that was already too much. Her right hand was already half lifted to reach for Elias. Then she saw the man's face. She stopped. She stopped so completely that the white sneaker she was bringing forward did not finish its step. It came down a half-inch from where she had meant to put it. Her right hand, half lifted, stayed in the air for 1 full second, and then came down very slowly to her side. She did not say anything. Her mouth was slightly open. Her chest rose once, sharply, under the cropped black top, and then she closed her mouth and made it not rise that way again. Daehyun saw her. His hand was still extended, the small red car still on his open palm, the boy still standing in front of him, with the half-tilted head. He had been about to bend lower and place the car gently in the boy's hand. He had been about to say something polite and meaningless about being careful in marble lobbies. But then he lifted his eyes past the boy and he saw her, and the gears of the watch inside his chest stopped hitching and locked. 4 years. 4 years, and the woman he had told to get out of his house in a low, cold voice and not look back was standing 20 feet from him, in white sneakers in the lobby of his own hotel, with her hair falling over one shoulder, exactly the way it had fallen the night he had married her. His hand, the one with the car, lowered an inch without his telling it to. The advisor on the left whispered something in Korean. Daehyun did not hear it. Isabella's eyes were on his face. They were not soft. They were not pleading. They were the eyes of a woman who had spent 4 years building a wall, brick by brick by brick, and had just walked around a corner and found out the wall was not as tall as she had thought. "Elias," she said again, and her voice was almost steady. "Come." The boy did not move. The boy was still looking at Daehyun. The boy lifted his small hand again, palm up, expectant. asking for his car back the way any 4-year-old asks for any toy back. Daehyun looked down at the small palm. He looked at the smile that had not gone away. He looked at the right corner of the small mouth, lifted just so, cold the way clean blades are cold. His own mouth opened. The words that came out of it were not the words he had meant to say. "That child," he said, in English, in a voice low enough that only the advisors and the boy and the woman could hear, "can't be mine." The room did not break. The chandelier did not swing. The orchid in the tall black vase did not move. The bodyguard at the elevator did not flinch. The two advisors went absolutely still, the way men go still when their boss has just said something they did not expect, and that they will spend the next hour deciding whether to pretend they did not hear. Isabella did not move. For one long second she just looked at him. Then a thing happened in her face that was not crying, and was not rage, and was not anything you could put a word on. It was the kind of small inner collapse that happens when a person realizes that the worst sentence the other person could possibly have chosen is the sentence they actually chose. Her jaw set. Her shoulders, which had already been square, became squarer. The pulse in the side of her neck became visible for a second, and then she swallowed, and it went back under the skin. She did not answer him. She started walking again. Her white sneakers crossed the marble in even strides. She did not run. She did not slow down. She walked the way a woman walks when she has decided that she will not give the man in the three-piece suit the satisfaction of a scene in his own lobby. She reached Elias. She did not pick him up. She crouched, one knee almost to the marble, and put her hand on his small back between his shoulder blades. "Baby," she said softly, "come on, let's go." Elias did not look at her. Elias was still looking at Daehyun, and then Elias did the thing. He took one small step forward. One small brown loafer left the floor, and landed half a foot closer to the man in the black suit. The boy was now well inside the personal space of the chairman of the Kang group, and the two advisors made identical tiny intakes of breath, and the bodyguard at the elevator twitched, and Isabella's hand on the boy's back tightened by a fraction. The boy tilted his head a little more. He looked up at Daehyun with the wide, dark, almond-shaped eyes that were his mother's shape and his father's color, with the small, soft, single-fold lid that was his father's only, with the high cheekbones that were neither parent's invention and both parents' gift. He smiled again, the same small, cold-blade smile on the right side, and in the same solemn 4-year-old voice, in clear English, with the very faint trace of an American kindergarten, he said, "Why do you smile the same as me?" There was no sound in the lobby for the space of 3 full breaths. The advisor on the left closed his eyes for 1 second and opened them again. The advisor on the right looked at Daehyun's face and then looked away, because what he saw there was not something a junior advisor was supposed to see on the face of his chairman. Isabella's hand on her son's back did not move. Her face did not move. But under her cropped black top, her chest stopped moving for several seconds because she had forgotten the next breath. Daehyun looked at the boy. He looked down at the small upturned face, at the smile that was the same smile his father had taught him in front of a long mirror in a paneled hallway when he was 8 years old. The smile his father had said was the Kang smile, the smile the men of the family wore in portraits and in boardrooms, and at funerals because it gave away nothing and warned everything. He looked at the smile on the face of a 4-year-old in a cream linen shirt who he had said could not be his. The wall in his chest did not fall. The wall in his chest cracked. It cracked silently. It cracked from the bottom. A thin, dry line ran up through it from somewhere very deep, and on the inside of that line was every photograph he had not allowed himself to look at, every voice message he had told himself not to keep, every night 4 years ago when he had stood in the dark in the long hallway of the Kang mansion and looked at the place where her shoes used to be by the door and not allowed himself to feel anything. He did not fall. His face did not move. His hand, the one with the red car, came up very slowly. He crouched. He crouched the way a man in a $3,000 suit crouches when he has not crouched in front of another human being in many years, with one knee held carefully off the marble, with his back straight, with his weight balanced on the ball of one foot. The advisors stared. The bodyguard at the elevator stared. 2 women in pearl gray uniforms behind the concierge desk stopped pretending to type. He was now eye to eye with the boy. He held the red car out, flat on his palm. "Here," he said in English. His voice was rough. In a way his voice almost never was. "It's yours." The boy did not take it right away. The boy was studying his face the way only small children study faces, without politeness, without flinching, with the open, frank attention of someone who has not yet learned to look away. "Why do you smile the same as me?" the boy said again. Patient. As if it were a perfectly fair question and he was waiting for a perfectly fair answer. Daehyun's throat worked once. Isabella, crouched beside her son, finally moved. Her hand slid down from his back to his small shoulder, and she pulled him, gently but very firmly, half a step back against her own body. She did not look at Daehyun. She would not look at Daehyun. She reached out with her other hand and lifted the red car off his palm without touching his palm. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was perfectly polite, the way a stranger thanks a stranger, and the politeness was the cruelest thing in the room. She pressed the car into Elias's small hand and closed his fingers around it. "Come on, baby." She stood. She lifted the boy onto her hip in one smooth motion. He went without protest, the red car gripped tight in one small fist, his face turned back over his mother's shoulder, still looking at Daehyun, still patient, still waiting for the answer to his question. Isabella turned. She walked back across the lobby toward the tall white columns she had come from. Her white sneakers crossed the same marble in reverse. Her hair, very long, swung once behind her. She did not look back. Daehyun stayed crouched on the marble for one more second. He stayed there in his $3,000 suit with his empty palm still open and the smell of lilies still in the air and the chandelier light still pooling around him. And from 20 feet away he watched the back of a woman in black leggings carry the back of a small boy in a cream linen shirt away from him through the tall white columns of his own hotel. Then he stood. He stood the way he had crouched, in one clean line, no wasted motion. He did not look at the advisors. "Move the meeting," he said in Korean. His voice was completely even. "Upstairs, now." The advisor on the left bowed his head an inch and said yes. Daehyun walked toward the elevators. The bodyguard there pressed the call button without being asked. The polished doors slid open. Daehyun stepped inside. He turned around. He faced the lobby. He saw the place on the marble where the small red car had stopped against his shoe. He saw the place where his son had been standing. He saw the place where she had been standing. The doors slid closed. Inside the elevator, alone except for the bodyguard who was staring straight ahead at the brass panel with the discipline of a man who would forget everything he had just seen the moment his shift ended, Daehyun did not move. He did not loosen his tie. He did not put his hand against the wall. He stood in the exact center of the elevator with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the brushed steel of the doors, and his breathing was perfectly even, and the muscle at the corner of his jaw was clenched so hard that a small tendon stood up under the skin. The numbers above the door climbed. 18, 19, 20. He thought of the boy's smile. He thought of his father's smile. He thought of the long mirror in the paneled hallway when he was 8 years old. 25. He thought of the way the boy had said, "Why do you smile the same as me?" The way he had said it like it was the most natural question in the world, like it was a thing that had been bothering him for a while, and he had finally found someone to ask. 28. He thought of Isabella's face when he had said the words. He thought of the small inner collapse that had not been crying. He thought of the way her shoulders had become squarer. He thought of the way she had said thank you with a politeness so cold it should have left frost on the marble. The doors opened on the 32nd floor. He walked out. Down on the ground floor, in a corner of the lobby near the tall white columns, Isabella was not walking anymore. She had carried Elias as far as the corridor behind the columns, the soft hush of the spa wing, and there she had set him down on a low velvet bench and crouched in front of him, and was now methodically straightening the collar of his cream linen shirt, because if she did not do something with her hands, she did not know what her hands would do. "Mama," Elias said. "Yes, baby." Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. She kept her eyes on the collar. "That man," Elias said. "Yes, baby." He had the same smile. Her hands stopped on the collar. She looked up at her son. His face was very serious. He was holding the red car against his chest, with both hands like a shield. His head was still tilted the way it had been tilted in the lobby. He was waiting for her to explain a thing that he already knew on some wordless animal level was important. She did not have an answer ready. She had spent 4 years preparing answers to a lot of questions Elias might one day ask. She had not prepared an answer for this one because she had genuinely believed that this man would never be in the same room as this child in this lifetime. "I saw it too, baby," she said softly. She brushed his soft brown coffee hair back from his forehead with the side of her thumb. "I saw it too. Who is he?" she breathed in. She breathed out. She kept her hand on his hair. He's nobody, baby. Elias frowned. 4-year-olds are very good at knowing when adults are lying about important things. And Elias frowned the small, precise frown of someone who has just been lied to and is filing it away for later. Okay, he said. She kissed the top of his head and stood up. Her knees were not entirely under her control. She locked them straight. She lifted him onto her hip again. Let's go home, baby. She walked him through the spa corridor toward the side exit, because she was not going to walk back through that lobby. Her white sneakers were absolutely silent on the carpet. The red car bobbed gently against her shoulder in Elias's small fist. Behind her, 32 floors above her head, in a corner office with a wall of black glass that looked out over the river and the bridges and the small bright grid of the city at evening, Kang Dae-hyun walked to his desk and did not sit down. He stood behind it with his hands flat on the polished black wood, and he looked out at the river, and he did not see the river. He saw a small red car on cream marble. He saw the right corner of a small mouth lifting in a smile he had not been wearing himself in this lifetime, but that he had worn in every photograph that had ever been taken of him as a child. He saw a woman in black leggings and a cropped black top walking away from him through tall white columns without ever once looking back. The advisor on the left came in quietly behind him and stopped at a respectful distance and said, in Korean, "Chairman, the acquisition meeting is set up in the boardroom whenever you are ready." Dae-hyun did not turn around. "Find out who she is," he said in Korean. "Sir?" "The woman in the lobby. With the boy. Find out who she is, where she lives, where the boy was born, when the boy was born, everything." "Sir," the advisor said. The advisor's voice was very careful. The advisor had been with the family for many years. The advisor knew exactly who the woman in the lobby was. The advisor had personally helped pack the boxes of her things 4 years ago under the direction of a woman in a black silk hanbok. The advisor said nothing about that. The advisor bowed his head 1 careful inch. "Yes, Chairman." He left. Dae-hyun stayed at the window with his hands flat on the polished black wood, and he did not move for a very long time, and the lights along the river bridges began to come on, one by one, as the sky outside went from gray to lavender to deep slow blue, and in his chest, the thin dry crack in the wall ran a little farther up from the bottom, and he did not let himself name what was on the other side of it yet. And far below him, in the back seat of a black town car, a small boy in a cream linen shirt was sitting on his mother's lap with a small red car held tight in both hands, asking her quietly, over and over, in the patient way of 4-year-olds, why the man in the lobby had smiled the same as him, and his mother was looking out the window at the river going past, and she was not answering, and she was not crying, and her hand on his small back was the only thing in the world that was not, in some small invisible way, beginning to come apart. The taxi crossed the bridge in slow traffic, and the river under it moved the color of old coins, and Elias kept his small forehead against the cool window the whole way home, his breath making a soft round cloud that grew and shrank on the glass. Isabella did not speak. She paid the driver in cash when they reached the curb in front of the small brick building on West 138th Street, and she carried Elias the last short flight of stairs because his legs had decided to be tired in the way that small legs decide. She unlocked the door. She set him down on the worn rug in the entry. She closed the door behind them and slid the chain across with 2 fingers, and stood for a long second with her forehead pressed against the painted wood. In the small bathroom, she ran a warm bath. She put 2 drops of lavender in the water. She washed Elias the way she had washed him every night of his small life, slow and careful, behind the ears, under the chin, between each small finger, and he did not ask any more questions, and that was worse than if he had asked 1,000. She wrapped him in the big white towel that was twice his size. She brushed his teeth. She read him the page about the small bear who could not find his red ball. She kissed the crown of his head, where the hair grew in a soft whorl. She turned off the lamp. She left the door open, a hand's width so the hallway light would lie across his pillow, in a thin, warm bar, the way he liked. Then she walked into the kitchen, very calmly, and lowered herself to the floor with her back against the cabinet under the sink, and pressed both fists hard against her mouth, and let her shoulders shake without sound, because the walls were thin and she would not let her son hear his mother break. She stayed there a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A pot from the apartment above set itself down on a stove with a small, dull clang. Somewhere out on the avenue, a bus released its brakes with that long, tired hiss buses make at the end of a route. She cried the way a person cries who has been holding a thing for 4 years and has just been told that the thing does not exist. When she could breathe again, she pushed herself up off the floor with one hand on the counter. She washed her face at the sink. She did not look in the mirror. She put the kettle on. She did not drink the tea when it was ready. She sat at the small table with her hands flat on the wood on either side of the cup and watched the steam rise and bend and disappear into the overhead light. And she thought about all the things she had built with her 2 hands in 4 years. The small, clean apartment, the speaking fees, the savings account, the school she had picked, the doctor she trusted, the woman downstairs who would watch Elias for an hour in an emergency, the whole quiet, careful architecture of a life that did not need Kang Dae-hyun, and she understood, sitting there at the table, that he had walked back into the middle of it tonight and put one polished black shoe through the floor. Across the city, in a glass tower above the harbor, Kang Dae-hyun was not sitting either. He was standing at the window of his private office on the 42nd floor of the Kang Tower, with his back to the room and his hands flat against the cold glass, palms open, fingers spread, the way a man stands when he is trying to push a wall away from himself and finding that the wall will not move. The lights of the city below him made small bright grids, and the harbor beyond them was a long black smear with the slow red flicker of a tanker moving south. He had not turned on the office lights. The only light in the room came from the city itself and from the green desk lamp behind him. The driver had brought him here straight from the hotel. He had not gone home. He had not called the house. He had walked into the elevator with the small wet stain on the front of his white shirt where the boy had pressed against him in the lobby, the smallest, faintest patch of damp from a child's open mouth and a child's loose curl of dark hair. And he had ridden up 42 floors without looking at the elevator mirror because he did not want to see what his own face was doing. Now in the office, he could not stop hearing the question, "Why do you smile like me?" The voice had been small and clean and not afraid. It had not been a child trying to please an adult. It had been a child stating a fact and waiting, politely, for the adult to explain. Dae-hyun had built an empire on knowing when a man across a table was lying and when a man across a table was telling a small true thing, and the boy in the lobby had been telling a small true thing. He pushed off the glass. He walked to the desk. He sat. He opened the lower right drawer and took out the slim black phone he used only for matters that did not pass through the company switchboard, and he called a number he had not dialed in 11 months. The man who answered did not say a name. He said, "Tell me." Dae-hyun said, "I need a paternity test. Tonight. Discreet. Lab, courier, sealed report. I have one of the samples already." There was a pause on the line. The pause was the sound of a professional adjusting to the size of a thing. "Whose?" the man said. "Mine," Dae-hyun said. "And a child." The man did not ask the child's age. The man did not ask the child's mother. The man said, 2 hours for the kit, 12 to 18 for the result. I will come to you." Dae-hyun ended the call. He set the phone face down on the desk. He did not move for a long minute. Then he reached up and very slowly loosened the black silk tie at his throat, pulled the knot down 2 inches, and the small motion seemed to cost him a thing that the closing of large deals had never cost him. He looked at the shirt. The damp patch had dried in the elevator. It had left behind a small, almost invisible ring on the white cotton over his sternum, the kind of mark a small mouth leaves when a small mouth has pressed itself once, by accident, against the chest of a stranger who happened to smell, in some way the small mouth could not name, like home. In a tall black house on the north side of the city, on the high floor where the family rooms were, Kang Sun-hee was already awake. She was awake because the small, thin man who managed information for the Kang household had called her at 12 minutes past 11, with the careful flat voice he used when he was bringing her a thing she would not enjoy. He had said that the young master had not returned home from the Imperial Nara. He had said the young master had gone to the office. He had said that the office security cameras showed the young master had gone in alone and had not, in the 47 minutes since, called for tea, called for a car, or called the house. He had said one more thing. He had said, "There is footage from the hotel lobby, madam, that I think you should see." Sun-hee was sitting in the armchair by the window of her sitting room, with the small thin man standing at a respectful distance, and the laptop open on the low lacquer table between them, and the silent black and white footage from the Imperial Nara security camera was playing on a loop, and she had already watched it 11 times. She watched the red toy car cross the marble. She watched the boy walk after it. She watched the boy stop with the toe of one small brown shoe against the polished Oxford of her son. She watched the boy look up. She watched the boy smile. The smile on the footage was not large. The smile on the footage was not even meant for the camera. The smile on the footage was the small tilt at the right corner of a child's mouth. The small private tilt that, on the face of a Kang man, had meant for 4 generations one specific thing, which was, "I see what you are doing, and I am not afraid of you." It was the smile her husband had given her on their wedding night when she had asked him a sharp question. It was the smile her father-in-law had given his rivals across the long table in the old house before the old house had been sold. It was the smile her son had given her, once, at the age of 7, when she had slapped him for breaking a Celadon bowl. It was on the face of the boy in the hotel lobby. It was, on the face of the boy in the hotel lobby, unmistakable. Sun-hee closed the laptop with 2 fingers. She set the laptop aside. She folded her hands in her lap, the right hand over the left, the heavy jade ring of the Kang family settling its cool weight against the back of her left wrist, and she sat for a long second without moving, while the small thin man waited at his respectful distance. Then she said very quietly, "Wake the council. Bring them here, now." The small thin man bowed and left without sound. When the door had closed behind him, Sun-hee stood. She walked to the tall window. She looked down across the dark garden where the white stones glowed faintly in the moonlight, and the small black pond at the center of the garden held a single perfect reflection of the moon, and she allowed her thin mouth, painted that day in the deep oxblood color she always wore, to move once, downward, at the corners, in a small private expression that no one in the world was alive to read. Then she straightened her back and turned and went to wait in the long room where the council always sat. By 2 in the morning, the courier had come to the 42nd floor with the small white kit in a black case. Daehyun had taken the swab from his own mouth in the private bathroom off the office. He had sealed it. He had handed the case back to the courier with one steady hand. The courier had bowed and disappeared into the elevator. Daehyun had returned to the desk. He had reached into his jacket and taken out the small folded paper napkin from the Imperial Nara lobby. The napkin a porter had handed him to wipe the boy's small wet print from the front of his shirt. The napkin he had not, for reasons he had not at the time understood, handed back. There was one curling dark hair caught in the soft fold of the paper. Just one. He had sealed it into the second envelope of the kit before the courier left. He had not let himself look at the hair for longer than the second it took to slide it into the envelope. He had not let himself think the word son. He sat at the desk now with the empty office around him, and the lights of the city very far below, and the green lamp making a small warm circle on the leather blotter. And he did, for the first time since he had been a boy of perhaps 7 years old, kneeling in his father's study, to be corrected for a small disobedience, what he had spent his entire adult life building an empire, to never have to do again. He waited. In the apartment on West 138th Street, Isabella did not sleep. She did not even try. She turned off the kitchen light at 1. She stood for a long time in the doorway of Elias's small room, watching the slow rise and fall of the blanket, where it covered his small back. She watched him roll once toward the wall, mumble a half-word, settle. She watched the thin bar of hallway light lie across his pillow, and across the soft dark curls at the back of his head, and across the small open hand he had let fall from under the blanket, and she stood there until her legs began to ache, because she could not bear to leave the doorway, because somewhere on the other side of this city, a man in a $1,000 coat was, she knew without needing to be told, already setting a machine in motion that would try to take this small sleeping body out of her arms. At 3:15, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The number was blocked. She let it ring 4 times. She let it ring 6. On the 8th ring, she answered, because if she did not answer, they would only call again, and she did not want them calling again when her son was asleep in the next room. The voice was a woman's voice. The voice was not young. The voice was the voice of a woman who had been speaking quietly into telephones for 40 years and had never once raised it, and had never once needed to. The voice said, in careful, slow English with the faint vowels of soul underneath, "Mrs. Wright." Isabella did not speak. The voice said, "You will know who I am." Isabella did not speak. The voice said, "I am calling at this hour so that we may talk without small ears in the room. I trust the child is asleep." Isabella moved the phone a small distance from her ear. She breathed once. She put the phone back. She said very evenly, "You do not say one word about my son." The voice on the other end was quiet for a long beat. Then the voice said, "He is not your son alone. Not anymore. You know this. After tonight, the matter of who he belongs to will be settled, not by you and not by me, but by a piece of paper from a laboratory in New Jersey that will arrive on a desk at the Kang Tower at approximately 3 in the afternoon tomorrow." Isabella felt the kitchen counter under her hand go cold. The voice said, "There are 2 ways this can go. In the first way, you are reasonable. You accept a sum of money. The sum will be larger than anything you have earned in your speaking career, and larger than anything you will ever earn. You sign a document, you move, you change the boy's name, you raise him quietly in a different city, with a different surname, and you never again use the word father in his presence." The voice paused. The pause was the pause of a woman who knew the value of silence. The voice said, "In the second way, you are not reasonable. In the second way, my son's lawyers file in family court tomorrow afternoon, the moment the paper arrives. In the second way, the boy is removed from your apartment within the week, pending hearing, and placed in temporary custody with the family, while the matter is reviewed. In the second way, you do not see him for a long time. In the second way, you spend every dollar you have ever earned, and every dollar your friends are willing to lend you, and you do not win." Isabella closed her eyes. She saw the small bar of hallway light across her son's pillow. She saw the small open hand fallen out from under the blanket. She heard, very clearly inside her own head, the small clean voice in the hotel lobby, asking why he smiled like me. She said, into the phone, "You misunderstand something." The voice on the other end waited. Isabella said, "You think you are talking to the woman who walked out of your library 4 years ago and put a ring on the table and did not look back. You are not. You are talking to the woman who raised that ring's son alone, in a 1-bedroom apartment in Harlem, on her own money, while you slept in a house with 12 bedrooms and did not once send a card. I am not afraid of your lawyers. I am not afraid of your court. I am not afraid of you." She paused. She let her own silence do, for 1 second, what the old woman's silence had been trying to do to her. Then she said, "And if anyone at all, comes to this door before I have spoken to your son in person, I will tell every reporter who has ever interviewed me, in detail, exactly who set up the wire transfers 4 years ago, and exactly which 2 old men in gray suits helped you do it. I have not forgotten their faces. I have not forgotten the dates. I will burn your house to the foundation from inside a television studio in Midtown, and I will smile while I do it, because I am out of patience and I am out of fear, and the only thing I have left in this world that is mine is asleep in the next room, and you will not have him." She ended the call. She set the phone, very carefully, face down on the counter. Then her legs went out from under her, and she sat down on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet for the 2nd time that night. And this time she did not cry, because she was past crying. She was in the cold, flat country that lies on the other side of crying, where a woman does her arithmetic. She got up after a minute. She poured the cold tea down the drain. She rinsed the cup. She set it upside down on the rack. She walked into the bedroom, sat on the edge of her bed, and called the only lawyer in the city whose number she had memorized, a woman named Yvette Boucher, who had once given the keynote at a conference Isabella had spoken at, and who had said, over coffee afterward, "If you ever need me, you call." "It is 4 in the morning, Yvette answered on the 2nd ring, the way certain lawyers do. Isabella told her, in 11 short sentences, what had happened in the hotel lobby and what had happened on the phone. She did not embellish. She did not cry. Yvette listened without interrupting. When Isabella had finished, Yvette said, "Do not pack anything. Do not move the child. Do not answer the door for anyone who is not me. I will be at your apartment at 8 in the morning with 2 associates. We file before noon. We get ahead of them. Sleep if you can." Isabella said, "I cannot sleep." Yvette said, "Then sit by your son and wait for me. I am coming." At 8:27 in the morning, a black town car pulled up in front of the brick building on West 138th Street, and Yvette Boucher, who was 5'2" and weighed perhaps 110 pounds, and wore a gray suit cut sharp enough to draw blood, climbed 3 flights of stairs with 2 younger lawyers behind her, and rang the bell. Isabella opened the door. The 2 women looked at each other for 1 beat without speaking. Then Yvette stepped in and put 1 small hand very briefly on Isabella's forearm, and that was the only soft thing in the whole morning. By 11, the petition was drafted. By 11:30, it was filed in family court downtown, naming Kang Dae-hyun, requesting an emergency order preventing removal of the minor child from the residence, pending paternity determination. requesting a confidentiality seal on all proceedings, requesting a hearing within 72 hours. By 11:45, a courier was leaving the Kang Tower's lobby with a copy of the petition in a sealed envelope addressed to the office of Kang Dae-hyun on the 42nd floor. At 12 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, a second courier arrived at the Kang Tower from a laboratory in New Jersey with a sealed report in a slim white envelope. The two envelopes met on the assistant's desk outside Dae-hyun's office at almost exactly the same moment. The assistant, a thin young Korean woman in a dark blouse who had worked for Dae-hyun for 3 years and had never once been asked to bring him anything personal, looked at the two envelopes for a long second. She straightened her blouse. She picked them both up. She walked to his door and knocked twice, the small, even double knock that meant a thing that could not wait. Dae-hyun's voice from inside said, "Come." She entered. He was sitting at the desk in the same clothes he had worn the night before. The tie was still loose at his throat. The shirt was the same shirt with the same faint dried ring over the sternum that he had not yet allowed himself to change. His hair was in place. His face was the face of a man who had not slept and had decided, several hours ago, that sleep was not going to be one of the things available to him for some time. She set the two envelopes on the blotter in front of him. She said, "From the laboratory, sir, and from a law firm in Midtown." Both marked urgent. He looked at the envelopes. He did not move his hands. He said, "Thank you." Closed the door. She bowed and stepped out. The door clicked shut. He sat looking at the two white rectangles on the green leather of the blotter for what might have been 20 seconds and might have been 5 minutes. The green lamp made small, soft reflections on the seals. Outside the window, the harbor was the color of a knife in afternoon light. Somewhere down on the street, a horn sounded once and did not sound again. He reached out at last and picked up the envelope from the laboratory. He used the small silver letter opener that had belonged to his father. He slid the single sheet of paper out onto the blotter and unfolded it with both hands, the way a man unfolds a thing he already knows the answer to, but must confirm with his own eyes, because there is no other way for the body to accept the thing the mind has been told. He read the top of the page. He read the middle of the page. He read the bottom of the page where the number was printed in clean black serif type next to the word probability and a colon. 99.99%. He did not move. He did not breathe for what felt to him like a long minute. Then very slowly, with neither sound nor warning, a single clear line of water came out of the corner of his right eye, slid the length of his cheek without speeding up or slowing down, paused for the smallest fraction of a second at the line of his jaw, and dropped, with a small, dark, precise stain, onto the corner of the laboratory report next to the number, where it sat, round and perfect, slowly soaking into the paper, while a man who had not wept since he was 8 years old sat alone in a glass tower above a harbor and did not, for several minutes, find that he was able to lift his hand to wipe it away. Outside the door, the assistant heard nothing. Inside the office, Kang Dae-hyun finally moved, after a long time, and picked up the second envelope, the one from the lawyer, and opened it, and read the petition, and laid it down beside the report, and put both of his hands flat on the desk on either side of the two papers, and looked up at the ceiling, and made, in his throat, a sound so small and so private that even he was not entirely sure, afterward, whether it had been a word or the broken first syllable of a name he had not been given the right to say. When he came down out of the building 2 hours later, in a clean shirt this time, in a fresh black coat, with the laboratory report folded once in the inside pocket over his heart and the lawyer's petition folded once in the inside pocket over his ribs, he did not get into the black car waiting at the curb. He waved the driver off with one hand. He walked the 4 blocks east to the small private park behind the old church on Park Avenue that the Kang family had used for 3 generations for the quiet meetings they did not wish to hold in offices, and he sat down on the green wooden bench under the largest of the plane trees, and he placed both of his hands palm down on his thighs, and he waited. He had sent a single message through Yvette Boucher's office an hour before. The message had said only 4 o'clock. The bench under the plane tree in the park behind St. Bartholomew's. Bring him. I will be alone. I will not touch him. I will not speak to him unless you tell me I may. At 3 minutes to 4, on the gravel path between the boxwood hedges, he heard the small, careful footsteps of a child who was being led by the hand of his mother, and his mother was looking out from under the brim of a soft black hat, and she was not smiling, and her hand on his small back was the only thing in the world that was telling him, at that moment, that he was safe. The black car came around the curve of the gravel path at exactly 4 o'clock. It stopped under the old oak tree at the edge of the private garden. The door in the back opened on its own. Kang Dae-hyun stepped down onto the gravel in his black three-piece suit, his white shirt crisp against his throat, his polished Oxford shoes catching a thin line of sunlight. He closed the door without looking back. Isabella saw him first. She was on the iron bench under the boxwood hedge with Elias on the grass at her feet, her hand on the small back of her son, and she did not stand up. The brim of her soft black hat threw a shadow across her cheekbones. Her dark brown skin caught the late afternoon light along her jaw, and her long wavy hair fell over her right shoulder in soft, heavy waves. She did not smile. Dae-hyun stopped at the edge of the grass. He looked at her, and then at the boy, and the small inclined smile pulled at the right corner of his mouth before he could stop it. Elias looked up. He inclined his head to the right side, the exact way his father did, and the small smile pulled at the right corner of his small mouth, and father and son smiled the same smile across the grass without a word. "You came on time," Isabella said. "I will always come on time," he said. His voice was low. His Korean accent ran underneath the English like dark water under thin ice. "Sit on the bench across from me," she said. "Not next to me, not yet." He sat on the iron bench across from her. The two benches faced each other across a small square of grass. Elias stayed on the grass between them, rolling the red car along an invisible road in the green blades, his small lips making the low engine sound that small boys make when no one is teaching them how. "I have news," Dae-hyun said. "Tell me. The investigation closed this morning at 9. I came here from the office without going home. What did they find?" "Everything," he said. The word fell on the gravel like a stone. "Every email planted in your inbox 4 years ago. Every text message rewritten on the family server before it reached my phone. The deposit of $240,000 wired into your account from a shell company in Macau the night before my father was buried. The shell traces through 3 layers to a man who has worked for my mother for 22 years. His name is Mr. Pak. He signed the transfer with his own hand." Isabella did not move. The wind lifted one wave of her hair and let it fall. "You have the signatures. I have the signatures. The metadata. The bank records. A video from the security camera outside my father's study on the night of the wake. It shows my mother and Mr. Pak going in at 2 in the morning. They came out 40 minutes later. The next day, the will was read. The next week, the emails appeared in your inbox." She was silent for a long moment. Elias rolled the red car in a slow circle around her left ankle. The small engine sound moved with him. "Why are you telling me this here?" she said. "Why not on the phone?" "Because I want you to see my face when I say it." "Then say it." "It was never you," he said. "There was nothing to forgive in you. There was only a room of old men and one old woman who decided, 4 years ago, that you were not the right kind of wife, and they wrote a story on paper, and I believed the paper, and I threw away the truth that was standing in front of me. I threw you away. I threw our son away before I knew he existed. I am not asking you to forgive me today. I am telling you what I did, out loud, in front of him, because he is old enough now to remember the sound of a man telling the truth." Elias looked up from the grass. He did not understand the words, but he understood the weight in his father's voice, and he stood up slowly, with the red car held against his chest, and he walked the 3 small steps across the grass and stopped between the 2 benches. He looked at his mother. He looked at his father. He held the red car out flat on his small palms. "It is fixed," Elias said. "The wheel does not fall now." Dae-hyun took the small car from his son's hands with both of his own large hands. He turned it over once. He turned it back. His thumb passed over the wheel that he had repaired a week ago in the private garden, the one he had spent an hour fitting with his own fingers while Isabella watched without speaking from another bench just like this one. "It is fixed," he said. "Push it," Elias said. Dae-hyun set the small car on the iron slat of the bench beside him and pushed it gently with one finger. The car rolled the length of the slat, hit the armrest, and stopped. Elias laughed. It was the first time his father had ever heard him laugh, and the sound went through Dae-hyun's chest like a blade that had been heated and then suddenly cooled, and he closed his eyes for 1 second so that Isabella would not see the water that came into them. "Tomorrow," Dae-hyun said, opening his eyes again and looking at Isabella, "the family is summoned to the house in the country, the 2 advisors, the household staff, my uncle from Busan, my cousin from the Hong Kong office, my mother. They will be in the long dining room at noon. I want you to come. No. Isabella. No. I am not going to sit at that table. I will not put my son in that house. Not yet. Not while she is still in it. She will not be in it after tomorrow. What does that mean? It means, he said, that tomorrow at noon, I will place every document on the table in front of all of them, and I will read the names out loud, and I will tell my mother that the gate of the Kang house is closed to her from that hour, and I will tell Mr. Pak and Mr. Ryu that their service to this family ended the moment they signed those papers, and I will do this in front of every uncle and every cousin so that no one in the family can pretend, later, that they did not hear it with their own ears. You will cut your mother? Yes. Out of the house. Out of the house. Out of the accounts. Out of the name. She will keep what is hers from her own father. She will not keep one cup that belongs to the Kang family. She will not sleep one more night under that roof. Isabella looked down at her hands in her lap. Her fingers were laced together very tightly. Her knuckles were the color of pale brown stone. I do not want you to do it for me, she said. I am not doing it for you. I am doing it because she lied to me for 4 years, and she stole my wife from me, and she stole my son from me. And a man who lets that go on living in his house is not a man. He is a chair that breathes. The wind moved through the boxwood and the leaves made a small dry sound like paper rubbing on paper. Then do it, she said. And when it is done, come back here. Same bench, same time, and tell me with your own mouth that it is done. I will. He stood up. He did not reach for her. He bent down on one knee on the grass in front of Elias and held out the red car on his open palm. Will you keep this for me? Daehyun said. Until tomorrow night. Yes, Elias said. Good. He stood up. He bowed once to Isabella, a small and exact bow from the waist, and he walked back across the gravel to the black car under the oak tree, and the door opened on its own again, and he got in, and the car moved away down the curve of the path, and the gravel made its small dry sound under the tires, and then there was nothing on the path except the long stripes of late sunlight falling between the hedges. Isabella stayed on the bench for a long time after the car was gone. Elias climbed up beside her. He set the red metal car on her knee. He came back, Elias said. Yes, she said. He came back. The next morning, the country house of the Kang family stood on the hill above the long valley. White stone and slate roof. 2 black iron gates at the bottom of the drive. At 10 minutes before noon, the cars began to arrive. The uncle from Busan in a dark gray sedan. The cousin from Hong Kong in a silver one. The 2 advisors in their own car together. The one in the passenger seat with his thin spectacles already pushed up on the bridge of his nose. Daehyun stood at the top of the marble steps in his black 3-piece suit, the white collar sharp under his jaw, and he greeted each one with a small bow. Kang Sun-hee was already inside, dressed in her modern black hanbok with the dark wine silk embroidery across the chest, her hair in its low impeccable coil, her single jade ring large on the 3rd finger of her right hand, her small pearl earrings catching the cold light. She sat at the foot of the long dining table because the head belonged, now, to her son. She thought the summons was about the new hotel in Singapore. At noon, Daehyun walked the length of the long dining room. He did not sit. He stood at the head of the table with both hands flat on the dark wood. The long table had been laid with porcelain and silver as if for a meal, but no food had been brought out. Only water in cut crystal glasses. Only the white napkins folded in small triangles beside each plate. 2 black leather portfolios lay on the table in front of Daehyun. He did not open them yet. I have asked all of you to come today, he said in Korean, because there is a matter in this family that must be ended in front of all of you, so that no one in this room, and no one in this name, can say afterwards that they did not know. The uncle from Busan set down his glass of water. The cousin from Hong Kong did not move. The 2 advisors, sitting side by side near the middle of the table, exchanged one quick look and then put their hands on the table where they could be seen. Sun-hee lifted her chin very slightly. Her small mouth, painted in its dark wine color, did not move. 4 years ago, Daehyun said, I drove my wife out of this family. I drove her out on the basis of a story that was told to me on paper, by a man whose signature is in front of me, on the order of a person in this room. I believed the story. I never asked one question. I let her walk out of our bedroom and out of this house, and I never followed her, and I never wrote to her, and for 4 years I lived inside that story as if it were the truth. He opened the first portfolio. He took out a small stack of printed pages. This is the original email, he said. Sent on the night of my father's wake from an account created on a server in Macau 6 hours earlier. The shell that paid for the server is on the 4th page. The bank transfer that funded the shell is on the 5th. The name signed at the bottom of the transfer is on the 6th. He held the 6th page up. Mr. Pak. The advisor on the left did not move. Only his hand, on the white tablecloth, became a fist and then opened again. And the photographs of the deposit slip from Macau, signed at 2 in the morning on the 11th of November 4 years ago. And this is the security recording from the hallway outside my father's study, the same night, between 2 and 2:40. He pressed the small black button. The image came up on the long screen at the far end of the room, the hallway, the closed study door, the clock reading 2 o'clock. A small thin woman in a long black hanbok came around the corner, followed by a tall thin man in spectacles. They went into the study. The clock moved. At 2:40 the door opened. They stopped in the hallway, and the woman turned her face toward the camera she did not know was there, and her face on the screen, 60 inches tall and very clear, was Kang Sun-hee. The uncle from Busan put his hand over his mouth. Daehyun stopped the recording. The screen went black. My mother, he said. She did not look at him. She looked at the cut crystal glass of water in front of her. You took my wife from me, he said. His voice did not shake. You took my son from me. You took 4 years from my life. You took the first words, the first steps, the first laugh, the first scraped knee of a boy who carries my name and my face and my smile, and you put them in a small dark place in your hand and held them there for 4 years, and you smiled at me across this table every Sunday while you held them. Sun-hee said nothing. She lifted the cut crystal glass and drank one small sip of water and set it down again exactly on the same mark on the tablecloth. From this hour, Daehyun said, the gate of this house is closed to you. You will not pass it again. The driver will take you to the apartment on the 7th floor of the building in Pyeongchang-dong that belonged to your father. That apartment is yours. Everything else in your name that came from the Kang family will be returned to the Kang family by the end of this week. The jade ring on your hand belonged to my grandmother. You will leave it on this table before you stand up. He looked at the 2 advisors. Mr. Pak, Mr. Ryu, your contracts with this family ended at the moment your hands touched those papers 4 years ago. The legal team has prepared documents that you will sign in the small library at 1 o'clock. You will not return to the office in Seoul. You will not speak to anyone in this family again. Do you understand? The 2 advisors stood up in the same motion. They bowed deeply, both of them, the kind of bow that lasted 3 seconds longer than it had to. They sat back down. We understand, Mr. Pak said. Good. He closed the first portfolio. He did not open the second. He turned his face to the uncle from Busan, and to the cousin from Hong Kong, and to the rest of the long table. There is one more thing, he said. He walked the length of the long room, and opened the tall double doors at the far end. Isabella was standing in the hallway. She had a black dress on, simple, long, with long sleeves, and her long wavy hair fell over her right shoulder, and her hand was on the small back of Elias, who stood beside her in his cream linen shirt, and his small dark trousers, and his small brown loafers, and his red metal car in his right hand. Daehyun stepped aside. He did not take her hand. He let her come into the long dining room on her own feet, with her son walking beside her, and the household staff who were standing along the wall lowered their eyes and did not lift them. Isabella walked the length of the long table. She did not look at Sun-hee. She stopped beside Daehyun at the head of the table, 2 steps to his left, and she placed her hand on the small back of Elias, and she stood there, straight, the brim of her black hat in her free hand, her dark brown skin warm against the dark walnut of the long table. This is my wife, Daehyun said in Korean, looking at the long room. Her name is Isabella Wright. This is my son. His name is Elias Wright. From this hour, both of these names will be entered in the family book. From this hour, both of these people will be received in every house that belongs to this name. And both of these people will be defended by every man who carries this name. And both of these people will be respected by every mouth that speaks this name. And any person at this table who has a difficulty with this is invited to stand now and to leave through the same door my mother is about to use. No one stood. The uncle from Busan put down his hand. He bowed his head once toward Isabella across the long table. The cousin from Hong Kong stood up halfway and bowed and sat down again. The 2 advisors had already lowered their faces to the tablecloth. Sun-hee took the jade ring off the 3rd finger of her right hand very slowly. She placed it on the tablecloth in front of her. She stood up. She did not look at her son. She walked the length of the long dining room with her small steps, her back perfectly straight, and she passed Isabella without turning her head, and she passed Elias without lowering her eyes, and she went out through the tall double doors, and the maid followed her, and the door closed behind them with a small, soft sound. Daehyun turned to Isabella. He turned in front of the entire long table, in front of his uncle and his cousin and the staff along the wall, and he looked down into her face under the brim of her black hat in her hand, and he said it in English so that she would not have to translate one word of it inside her own head. I should have done this 4 years ago. Isabella did not answer. She looked at him for a long moment. She lifted her free hand, and she set it very lightly on the lapel of his black suit jacket, over the place where his heart was, and she left it there, for the space of 3 slow breaths, and then she took it away. You did it today, she said. Elias tugged on the leg of his father's black trousers. Daehyun looked down. Elias held up the red metal car. Push it on the table, Elias said. Daehyun took the red metal car. He bent over the long walnut table in front of his uncle and his cousin and his staff, and he set the small red car on the dark wood, and he pushed it gently with one finger, and the small red car rolled the length of the table between the cut crystal glasses and the folded white napkins and the jade ring lying alone on the tablecloth. And it rolled until it stopped at the far end of the table, and the long dining room was very quiet, and Elias laughed once, a small bright sound, and the uncle from Busan, the hard old man from Busan who had not smiled inside this house in 11 years, smiled into his own hand and looked away toward the tall windows so that no one would see it. That night the country house was empty of Sunhee for the first time in 40 years. The black car came back down the gravel drive at 8:30. Daehyun got out alone. He stood at the bottom of the marble steps, his face turned up to the second floor, where one window on the east side of the house was already lit with a soft yellow lamp, and behind the curtain the shape of a small boy could be seen sitting on the edge of a large bed, swinging his small legs. Daehyun went up the wide curving staircase and stopped outside the door of the east bedroom. He stood with one hand on the doorframe until Isabella's voice on the other side said quietly, without surprise, "You can come in." He opened the door. He sat down on the small embroidered chair beside the bed, and Elias, in small white pajamas, leaned across his mother's lap and put the red metal car on his father's knee. And they stayed like that, the 3 of them, in the soft yellow lamplight, while outside the tall windows, the long valley grew dark. Isabella did not say yes that night. She did not say yes the next morning, when he met her on the terrace at the back of the house, with the long view down across the valley, and the white linen tablecloth on the small round table, and the silver coffee pot, and the small basket of pastries from the village, and the old black ring box from his grandfather's drawer set quietly between the 2 cups. He did not open the box. He set it between them, and he did not push it across the table. "That is the ring my grandfather gave my grandmother," he said, before he gave her the name, before he gave her the house, before he gave her anything else. It was his mother's. "It is not the ring you wore 4 years ago. That ring is in a drawer in Seoul, and I will burn it tonight if you want me to, because it was given to you under a lie. This one was not." She looked at the small black box. She did not open it. "I am not going to say yes today," she said. "I know. I am not going to say yes next week. I know. I will say maybe. I will say, I will sit at this table with you again. I will say, I will let you see Elias every day that you want to see him. I will say, I will not run again. That is what I have today. That is enough. It is not enough for a ring. Then keep the box. Do not open it. Put it in your drawer. The day you open it, if that day comes, you will open it. If it does not come, you will give the box back to me, and I will put it in the drawer where it has been for 60 years, and I will be your son's father for the rest of my life anyway, because that is what I am, with or without the box." She took the small black box off the white tablecloth. She did not open it. She put it into the pocket of her long black dress, and her hand stayed in the pocket for a moment, and then she took her hand out, empty. "All right," she said. He did not smile. He bowed his head once over the small white coffee cup, and he poured her a cup of coffee with his own hand, and the cup made a small bright sound on the saucer when he set it down in front of her, and she did not say thank you in words, but she lifted the cup, and she looked at him over the rim of the cup, and the brim of her black hat threw a thin shadow across her cheekbones, and her dark brown eyes held his for a long moment over the cooling coffee, and that was the morning. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning at the end of summer, the breakfast table on the same terrace was set for 3. The white linen tablecloth was the same. The silver coffee pot was the same. The small basket of pastries from the village was the same. The small black box was no longer in Isabella's pocket. The old ring, the ring of the grandfather's grandmother, was on the third finger of Isabella's left hand, simple, gold, with one small old diamond that did not catch the light unless the wearer turned her hand a certain way. Elias was sitting between them in his small white linen shirt and his small dark trousers, his small brown loafers swinging above the stone floor of the terrace, the red metal car parked beside his glass of orange juice. He took one bite of his small piece of toasted bread. He chewed it slowly. He looked at his father. He looked at his mother. He inclined his small head to the right side, the way his father did, the small smile pulling at the right corner of his small mouth, the same smile, exactly. 3 faces around the same table, and he said it in his small, clear voice the way only a 4-year-old who has been waiting all week to ask can say it. "Are you going to marry again?" Elias said. Daehyun set down his coffee cup. He looked across the table at Isabella. The small, inclined smile pulled at the right corner of his own mouth. He did not answer his son. He waited. Isabella took a slow sip of her coffee. She set the cup down on the saucer. She looked at her son, and then at her husband, and the brim of her black hat in the chair beside her caught one thin line of morning sun. "Maybe," Isabella said. "I think I still like him." The red metal car rolled the length of the white linen tablecloth, pushed by one small finger, and stopped against the silver coffee pot. And Elias laughed, and Daehyun laughed, the first real laugh anyone in that house had heard from him in 5 years, and Isabella, in the slow, soft light of the late summer morning, allowed herself, finally, to smile. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been pushed out of a family that called you not legacy enough, and chosen to raise your child with dignity instead of begging to be let back in? Have you ever watched a man on his knees fixing a small red car, and realized that the apology you waited 4 years for was finally arriving, too late and just in time? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about motherhood, dignity, and slow redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel